Chapter 1164. In chapters 802 and 803, Wang Zhen's nightmares after he was injured brought him back to his miserable childhood. As a man who had been beaten since he was a child, from the very beginning when he was beaten by his wife and his wife, to the tools he chose to use to beat himself up, Wang Zhen's experiences could only be described as legendary. Because of his special constitution of being able to withstand beatings and awakening after being beaten, Wang Zhen's body had been tortured by all kinds of tools. A god-beating whip as thick as a cola bottle, a meteor hammer covered in 36,000 spikes, a skull-crushing stone forged from king iron. Wang Zhen had survived the torture of these tools. His miserable childhood and the pressure of life hadn't completely crushed him, and he later realized a truth. He might be a natural warrior, and should charge at the very front as a meat shield. Thus, when Wang Zhen decided to use his body to attract the enemy's attention, the people behind him looked at his back and felt that he was unprecedentedly handsome. "This is for you." Wang Zhen took off his life-saving golden talisman and gave it to Nan Yixio. "For me?" Nan Yixio couldn't believe it. Logically speaking, if Wang Zhen wanted to give it to someone, it should be Super Chen. Super Chen was from number 60 high. Logically speaking, he shouldn't give it to an outsider like him. Even if they were in an alliance, it didn't make sense to give him such an important life-saving golden talisman. "If you give it to me, what will you do?" "It's too dangerous," Nan Yixio declined. "It's fine, they can't hurt me." Wang Zhen smiled confidently. "I'm giving it to you because I trust you. If something really goes wrong, don't worry about me, just think of a way to evacuate with Super Chen and the four-eyed man." Nan Yixio was touched by this feeling of being trusted. He no longer hesitated, and directly reached out to take the golden talisman. Since he had taken it, he had a responsibility and a mission. Nan Yixio was a responsible and reliable person. Wang Zhen had long since noticed this. As someone from the domain of the gods, it was impossible for him to not have the ability to peer into a person's heart. Strictly speaking, this was also one of Wang Zhen's special talents. Because he had grown up experiencing all kinds of violence and malice, Wang Zhen was especially sensitive to malice, and could sense the labels in the depths of a person's heart. For example, Wang Zhen had seen labels like upright, courageous, witty, and reliable for Nan Yixio. For example, the labels Wang Zhen saw for Lu Qingyi were violent, tsundra, kind, charming. For example, Gu Xuanji had very few labels: scheming, keeper of order. Because of Gu Xuanji's special identity and the fact that Wang Zhen's strength was partly suppressed by heavenly Tao, Wang Ling couldn't clearly see all of Gu Xuanji's tags. Under normal circumstances, he could see at least 4 labels in the depths of other people's hearts. Sometimes, there would be a dozen or even 20 of them. Of course, there were also people who could not feel the label. For example, Wang Zhen remembered that when he had checked the tags, Wang Ling's tag had been like this. After discussing their strategy with Nan Yixio, Wang Zhen charged forward without a care for his own safety. Although he was sure that Gao Tianming, who was at the foundation establishment stage, wouldn't be able to harm his body, there was no way he would use his body to block the attack in public. That would be too obvious. So while Wang Zhen had gone there with the intention of using his body to taunt Gao Tianming, he still wanted to use his own reflexes to avoid the attack. How fast could a foundation establishment cultivator's attack be? He would be able to react in time. Furthermore, even if he was hit, it wouldn't hurt much, like a mosquito bite. Back then, when he had been hit by the god-beating whip, he hadn't even cried out. After advancing another 4 li, Wang Zhen was less than 1 li away from the foot of Mist Peak. Such an obvious target had naturally already been noticed by the students on the mountaintop. Several sharp arrows shot at Wang Zhen. Wang Zhen's dynamic vision was simply overkill in front of a foundation establishment cultivator, and when the arrows came at him, he felt as if they were moving at a speed that was 1,000 times slower than before. Wang Zhen casually dodged to the side and perfectly avoided them. This posture was a little like Wang Ling's. During his days on Earth, Wang Zhen had often thought about his battles with Wang Ling, and had also subconsciously imitated Wang Ling's more subtle movements. Unfortunately, although he was imitating them, he couldn't grasp Wang Ling's essence. On the mountaintop, Gao Tianming had already noticed what was going on down below. "Captain Gao, we found someone from number 60 high," a Stars High School student said expressionlessly as he stepped forward. The entire Star Do High School had already been controlled by Gao Tianming's virus puppet spell, and the entire 10-man team was now under his control. As far as Gao Tianming was concerned, these people were nothing more than tools under his command. He stared at Wang Zhen at the foot of the mountain with a profound expression in his eyes, and then sank into deep thought. Gao Tianming took out a photo from his pocket, and after comparing it with a puppet with a telescopic function, he confirmed that the person at the foot of the mountain was Wang Zhen himself. Someone had found him a while ago and given him a photo. The people in the photo were all from number 60 high school: Wang Zhen, Lu Qingyi, Gu Xuanji, Zhen Yuan, Zhen Yuan, and Fang Xing. Gao Tianming didn't know where these people came from, but after the person had given him the photo, he had been asked to severely injure these targets as much as possible in this competition. Of course, severely injuring these big shots was easier said than done. Given Gao Tianming's original strength, it was naturally difficult. Thus, that person gave Gao Tianming a frozen dumpling. "What's this?" Gao Tianming couldn't believe his eyes. "Something that can permanently increase your strength for a short period of time," the mysterious man in the white cloak said to him. "Dumpling? This isn't an ordinary dumpling. It was almost destroyed, but I managed to recover quite a bit of it from the remains. Eat it, and you'll have a foothold in the world." Before Gao Tianming had eaten the dumpling, he had thought that the person in front of him might be an out-and-out psychopath. But while the person's words were Chinibu, they carried a very demonic power. Gao Tianming felt like he couldn't control his hands as he grabbed a dumpling and ate it. At that moment, Wang Zhen still didn't know that the person he was facing wasn't an ordinary Foundation establishment cultivator. Gao Tianming had been concealing his strength during the test. He had obtained the power of Shadow Dao, and under the guidance of the mysterious person who had given him the dumpling, he had learned to control his shadow. As long as he put it away, he could perfectly suppress his strength. And now, it was time to release his shadow. Gao Tianming knew that he had already become very strong, but in the end, he still wanted to find an opponent to test it out on. In any case, he would only severely injure the other party, not kill them. This was what Gao Tianming thought in his heart. Then, he would release his shadow. The sudden danger made all the hair on Wang Zhen's body stand on end. He actually sensed the scent of death. Chapter 1165. As an outstanding meat shield, Wang Zhen boasted that there weren't many attacks that could truly make him tremble, not to mention that this was a competition between Foundation establishment cultivators. Wang Zhen hadn't been that serious to begin with, and never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that a Foundation establishment high school student could burst out with such frightening strength. This wasn't a level that a Foundation establishment cultivator should have. He saw a puppet charging at him at top speed. This was a puppet made of fine steel. It was very large and 2 meters tall, and its broad body was like a roly-poly toy. As it charged, there was the irritating sound of gears turning, and the steel wings on its back cut through the air like a cat scratching a blackboard. Every puppeteer had their own exclusive puppet, and Gao Tianming's puppet was called Splitter, which cut through the air as it attacked. With the smile of a rag doll that could be seen in horror movies, it opened its steel teeth and swallowed Wang Zhen. Wang Zhen wasn't afraid of this level of attack. As one of the most outstanding meat shield warriors in the domain of the gods, Wang Zhen directly chose to meet force with force. He wanted to see what secrets this puppet, which had been strengthened by this mysterious power, was hiding. But when Wang Zhen's fist collided with Splitter's teeth, a black shadow suddenly descended, and Wang Zhen felt a powerful attractive force. In the next second, darkness descended. When he came back to his senses, the scene in front of him was no longer in Nine Dragon Mountain. It was a wasteland filled with shadows. He couldn't hear a single sound, only a disgusting feeling lingering around his body. The smell of blood and gore filled his 5 senses, making him feel like he was tied up and sunk into a pool of blood. Was he in the stomach of that Splitter just now? No, Wang Zhen felt that things were far from being as simple as he had imagined. He was convinced that the place he was in was a different world, an existence similar to a small world. It was simply impossible for a building foundation stage cultivator to possess this kind of power. Furthermore, this world was really too dark. A cultivator's small world was mostly constructed by the nomological laws of heavenly Tao. Before Wang Zhen's power was restricted, he had his own small world. In a small world, there could be mountains and rivers, forests and deserts, and life. To use a more appropriate analogy, Wang Zhen felt that a true small world was like a player's manor system in a game. After the nomological construction was complete, you could freely decorate your own manor, plant flowers and raise animals. However, this alternate world in front of him was unimaginably dark. All of a sudden, Wang Zhen recalled something that Wang Ling had mentioned before: shadow image space. Could this be the shadow image space that had been formed under the influence of Ling Zhenren's little sister? He knew that Wang Ling had expended a lot of energy to deal with the frozen dumplings that had been on the run recently. Wang Zhen had thought that he had already solved the problem, but he hadn't expected to run into it again here. At that moment, Wang Zhen was sure that he had already been swallowed into the shadow image space, and the way to break free was to find the inner demon in the shadow image space, defeat it and disintegrate it from the inside. Just as he was about to make a move, he suddenly felt a stabbing pain in his body. His entire body was turning into wood. He had become a wooden puppet. Then, threads as fine as gossamer threads fell from the sky and connected to his body one after another. Wang Zhen realized that he had already lost all control of his body, and had completely turned into a marionette. Spurred on by this mysterious force, Wang Zhen walked step by step toward a palace. This was the only palace in the entire shadow image space. Wang Zhen was surprised to find that there were other people here who had become puppets like him. Many of them were students participating in the competition this time. All of their bodies were suspended by threads, and their bodies moved according to the will of this world. A force led Wang Zhen to a resource area. His completely uncontrollable body picked up the bricks piled on the ground, and then moved toward a wall that had yet to be completed. A puppet in front of Wang Zhen accidentally fell, and the brick in its hand shattered when it hit the ground. "Don't defy my will." Gao Tianming's faint voice came from the space. An invisible whip lashed out at the puppet that had made a mistake, and a layer of sawdust and a strong smell of blood flew out of the puppet. In that instant, Wang Zhen suddenly understood. This palace was the sweatshop of all the people who had been forcibly turned into puppets. Is this the power of Shadow Dao? Wang Zhen was amazed. Shadow image world, and the unique power of each shadow image world. Wang Zhen knew that he was probably trapped. Now, he needed to think of a way to let people know where on earth he was trapped. According to the plan he had originally discussed with Wang Zhen, Nan Yixio was going to take Super Chen to cut off the threads of the kite puppets to prevent Gao Tianming from fishing for resources. But halfway there, Nan Yixio's expression suddenly turned serious. Something's not right. Classmate Wang Zhen's aura has suddenly disappeared. This situation made Nan Yixio's hair stand on end. There were only 3 possibilities for a person's aura to suddenly disappear from the map. 1. He was deliberately hiding his aura. This was unlikely to happen, because according to the original plan, Wang Zhen was going to act as a meat shield to taunt the other party, and he would love nothing more than for his aura to be captured by the other party. 2. He had fallen into a mysterious space. It could be a free spell, or it could be a small world or something like that. But the problem was, how could an almighty who could open a small world appear in a foundation establishment competition? The last and third possibility was the one Nan Yixio didn't want to believe the most: death. On the other side, in number 60 High's camp, Lu Qingyi felt a little uneasy. At the beginning, she had sensed that Wang Zhen's aura seemed to have disappeared from the entire 9 Dragon Mountain map. But that didn't rule out the possibility that Wang Zhen had hidden his aura for the sake of carrying out the mission. This idiot, could he even make a mistake in a foundation establishment competition? Lu Qingyi was a little worried. She didn't like Wang Zhen. When she had fled to Earth to escape marriage, she had even hoped countless times that this hateful guy would die. But now, Heavenly Tao had punished her and Wang Zhen by restricting part of their strength, and they were trapped on Earth, living the lives of others. She realized that Wang Zhen actually wasn't as annoying as she had thought. At the same time, Wang Ling's expression gradually turned serious. If his judgment was correct, what had just happened was indeed the aura of Shadow Dao. He had already wiped out all those frozen dumplings, but there were still remnants. Wang Ling frowned slightly. He had reason to believe that the disappearance of Wang Zhen's aura had something to do with this Shadow Dao aura. Let's go take a look. At that moment, Wang Ling sighed in his heart. He had always been someone who was afraid of trouble. But when all was said and done, this was his little sister's fault. It was a brother's duty to clean up his little sister's mess. Chapter 1166. The 12 kite puppets responsible for collecting resources operated according to his will. As he collected resources, he could use the kite puppets to look into the distance and enjoy the beautiful scenery at the foot of Mist Peak. This feeling of looking down on all the mountains made him feel, for the first time, the pleasure of standing at a high place and obtaining infinite power. The feeling of having power was indeed wonderful. For Gao Tianming, Shadow Dao was like a piece of chocolate that his body had been craving for sugar for a long time. It gave him a strong sense of satisfaction both mentally and physically. Shadow Dao, Shadow Image, and the unique Shadow Image ability that had been activated, Gao Tianming had no idea that there was such a magical power in this world. He didn't know how he could lose the competition with this special ability. He could use Shadow Image to bring people into the Shadow Image space, and then forcibly transform them into his puppets who would work in the space. In the long run, his Shadow Image space could expand without limit, and thus accommodate more puppets. And these people who had been turned into puppets would become stumbling blocks on his road to success. For Gao Tianming, these puppets were like rewards from a claw fishing machine in the mall. Not only would they become employees in his puppet factory, but they would also become unique collectibles. "Captain, there seems to be someone at the foot of the mountain." At that moment, a voice sounded in Gao Tianming's ear. The speaker was the deputy captain of No. 1 Devil Subduing High School, Xia Ming, a man with naturally curly, blonde hair. Xia Ming had also become Gao Tianming's puppet. But Gao Tianming still held back when it came to his classmates. He didn't include them in his puppet factory. After the competition was over, Gao Tianming would release all the students from No. 1 Devil Subduing High School. It was too dangerous to let them act according to his own thoughts. It would be better to turn them into his puppets and let him control them. That way, he would be able to win the competition smoothly. Because of the lush vegetation around Nine Dragon Mountain, Gao Tianming was worried that there might be a blind spot that he couldn't cover, so he had sent a professional chess piece like Xia Ming to hide at the foot of the mountain as a human guard. Once he discovered the enemy, he could quickly use the kite puppet's threads to fish them back to the top of the mountain to report the situation. Thus, Gao Tianming was very surprised when he heard Xia Ming's report. He had already noticed that the coward Nan Ishio had run away with the scouts. Then, who else would come? Titan High's Zhu Hanyun? Or No. 60 High's Lotus Sun? Gao Tianming imagined his opponents in his mind. Judging from the first round of the knockout round, he felt that the strength of these two people was close to his own. If it was Zhu Hanyun, he could take advantage of the situation to subdue him and turn him into a puppet, using him as a meat tank. If it was Lotus Sun, Gao Tianming felt that if it really was Lotus Sun, he would turn her into his puppet. Gao Tianming still had plans to become the son-in-law of Huaguo Water Curtain Group, and the reason why he was working so hard was that one day he could rival Lotus Sunday. Sometimes, a person's birth determined the starting line. Gao Tianming had to admit that he was too late to start. But if he worked harder, he might be able to catch up. In Gao Tianming's eyes, the powerful abilities he had obtained were the best proof of his hard work. However, when he dispatched the kite puppets to observe the person at the foot of the mountain, Gao Tianming's expression abruptly changed. He had guessed wrong. This person wasn't Zhu Hanyun or Lotus Sunday. It was No. 60 High, someone he couldn't think of no matter what. This person is... Gao Tianming tried his best to recall this expressionless young man with a pair of dead fish eyes who had climbed Mist Peak from the foot of the mountain. The wind pressure on Mist Peak blew his loose school uniform up and down, causing it to flutter in the wind. The teenager moved with ease as he faced the enormous wind pressure and advanced steadily. Mist Peak could be divided into 4 stages from the foot of the mountain to the top. The first stage was the stable stage, during which the wind pressure was moderate and similar to that of a typhoon. The second stage was the transition stage, during which the wind pressure was more violent than that of a typhoon. Cultivators who needed to reach the top would use the absorption ability of spirit energy to firmly anchor their feet to the ground and advance step by step. If there was insufficient spirit energy in this stage, it was very likely that they would be overturned halfway up the mountain. The third stage was known as the hellish windstorm. At its peak, the wind pressure could weigh more than a dozen tons. It was like a truck falling from the top of a mountain, constantly pressing on one's shoulders. Without any assistance, one's life might even be in danger. The fourth stage was the safe stage. Because of Mist Peak's unique geographical location, only the top of the mountain had 0 wind pressure. But as someone who had already reached the top, when Gao Tianming saw Wang Ling stroll through the second stage in such a relaxed manner like an old man strolling through his back garden, and even in the third stage, Hell's Phoenix Mist, it was simply inconceivable to Gao Tianming. He's actually not affected in the slightest by such strong wind pressure. But very quickly, Gao Tianming noticed something off about Wang Ling. He saw that talismans were actually burning non-stop on Wang Ling's right hand. That was a huge number of wind-stabilizing talismans. As long as he had these talismans, he would be able to stand tall in a typhoon. So it's not because of his strength. The sharpness in Gao Tianming's eyes gradually faded as he stared at Wang Ling, who was burning the wind-stabilizing talismans non-stop at the foot of the mountain, and he couldn't help sneering in his heart. In his opinion, this was just a weirdo who was about to throw his life away. Admittedly, there was no need for Wang Ling to use the wind-stabilizing talismans. The wind pressure of this mere mist peak couldn't crush him. But considering that this was a competition, and that someone might be paying attention to their movements at any time, Wang Ling decided to play it safe and use the talismans to conceal his true strength. In this way, it would look like he was borrowing the power of the talismans. After successfully reaching the top of the mountain, the wind on the mountaintop calmed down, and Wang Ling naturally didn't need to continue burning the talismans. With one hand in his trouser pocket, he walked in Gao Tianming's direction. At such a close distance, he could already sense the evil power emanating from Gao Tianming's body. This wasn't because the power of Shadow Dao was evil. It was because Shadow Dao stimulated the evil in a person's heart and awakened their inner demons. If you were a good person who had socialist core values, who was well-rounded in all aspects of morality, intelligence, physique, beauty, and labor, then not only would you obtain the formidable power of Shadow Dao, you wouldn't be eroded by evil. Chapter 1167. The dual nature of Shadow Dao was a fatal flaw that made it easier for evil people to take advantage of it. But Wang Ling felt that this flaw could be completely fixed. After all, Nguyen hadn't been born yet. Although she might be the strongest embryo on Earth or even in the universe right now, her ability to control Shadow Dao was definitely still very limited. As long as Nguyen grew up and got rid of the evil side of Shadow Dao, it would still be a Dao that could benefit all of humanity. Wang Ling wasn't sure whether Wang Nguyen would go berserk like him after birth because she couldn't control her strength, but he was sure that Father and Mother Wang's guidance wouldn't change. As her big brother who had experienced the pain of losing control, the only thing he could do was help Nguyen avoid some detours. Ascending to the top by burning talismans? Number 60 high is really full of capable people. Everyone in the command center had noticed the activity on the top of Mist Peak as they watched this scene unfold in front of them. Earlier, the image of Wang Jin being swallowed by Gao Tianming had been in a blind spot, and hadn't been captured. Until now, the command center still didn't know that Gao Tianming had become a demon. Thus, when Wang Ling appeared on the mountaintop in an attempt to rescue Wang Zhen, the headmasters in the command center thought it was nothing more than an ordinary showdown between Foundation establishment cultivators. But as Wang Ling's chief disciple, Zhui instantly understood what Wang Ling was trying to do. He knew Wang Ling's personality too well. They would not easily appear on the front lines and take action. Once he chose to make a move, he must have encountered some sort of trouble. As for burning talismans to ascend to the top, it was most likely just a cover-up. As Audiobook's disciple, even if he wasn't by Wang Ling's side and wasn't even the overall commander this time, Audiobook could almost instantly understand the task of diverting attention. He immediately gestured to the control staff on the side to cut off the image. In order to prevent this kind of situation from happening, Audiobook and grenade-throwing senior immortal had already taken over the position of the image operator, and this person had in fact been sent by the Office of Strategic Deception. Audiobook secretly breathed a sigh of relief when he saw Wang Ling cut off from the big screen. But old Huang's next words made Audiobook tense up again. What for? I remember the list saying that this Gao Tianming is the strongest freshman in number 1 Devil Subduing High, and he's also the team leader this time. His opponent was number 60 High's mascot, student Wang Ling. It should be very interesting. Audiobook, given old Huang's status as the Shifu of President Qi, one of the 10 founding generals, he could be said to be highly respected in the cultivation world, so it was impossible for Audiobook to not have good judgment. As soon as old Huang spoke, he immediately knew that he had no choice but to switch back. Fortunately, Audiobook still had Plan B. This was also Wang Ling's backup plan, which was to prevent the scene from cutting back. However, the scene they saw wasn't the real battle scene. At that moment, in a studio in Songhai City, Dharmaraja and Fatty Luo, this pair of slightly chubby buffoons, were already fully prepared. They had already gotten ready the moment the scene had cut off for the first time. In any case, they were both mighty beings of the transformation stage, so it was not difficult for them to imitate the duel between two Foundation establishment stage cultivators. The studio here had a real-time projection effect, which could project the panoramic view of Mist Peak into the studio. The extremely realistic construction of the scene made it almost impossible to distinguish the real from the fake. What Dharmaraja and Fatty Luo needed to do was use the transformation spell to change into Gao Tianming and Wang Ling's appearances. Then, he used all kinds of small props prepared in advance to perform in real time. Fatty Luo had prepared these props early in the morning. Grenade-throwing senior immortal had previously investigated and obtained a complete list of magic treasures which students from various major schools might smuggle into the competition. The puppet from number 1 Devil Subduing High was on the list. Now that it was Wang Ling and Gao Tianming's duel, Fatty Luo immediately transformed into Gao Tianming, put on the clothes which he had prepared beforehand, and took out the puppet prop which he had personally developed. His Fatty Luo hardware had been open for so long, and he had taken orders for all kinds of strange magic treasures, so naturally he had this kind of puppet. Hence, making puppets was not a difficult task for Fatty Luo. Fatty Luo, isn't this puppet of yours a little too exquisite? When Boss Luo took out the puppet which he had designed, Dharmaraja was completely stupefied. Rather than calling it a puppet, he felt that it would be better to directly call it an exquisite figurine. Not only had it been painted and colored from top to bottom, even its figure had been configured according to the golden ratio. The most important thing was that it was dressed in clothes, and was so exquisite that even its knuckles could move freely. Fatty Luo, Dharmaraja, you don't understand. Puppets also need to be aesthetically pleasing. In any case, I'm a magic treasure designer. I really can't bring out a crude and ugly puppet which a Foundation establishment junior like Gao Tianming is using. Dharmaraja, I understand that, but the problem is, why does your puppet look like Lord Jinka? Fatty Luo, nonsense. Only Lord Jinka is worthy of me taking him so seriously. Be careful when you fight me later. Don't break my figurines, oh no, my puppets. In any case, it's just an act, so don't go overboard. Dharmaraja, then do you have any other puppets? Change to another one. Fatty Luo, yes. I'll change to another one now, don't regret it. Dharmaraja suddenly had a bad feeling. At that moment, as the two of them were talking, Audiobook sent a signal from the command center. The scene was about to be cut back. Dharmaraja and Fatty Luo were ready for battle, and instantly entered Oscar Best Actor mode. There was no doubt that this was an exchange between two acting masters. Wang Ling, played by Dharmaraja, looked expressionlessly at Gao Tianming, played by Fatty Luo. Dharmaraja didn't speak, because he knew that Ling Jinren had always been a man of few words, and if he spoke too much, it would be easy for him to give himself away. But as for Gao Tianming, because Fatty Luo didn't know him very well, he could only rely on himself to act. Thus, when old Huang and the headmasters in the command center saw the scene in the studio, everyone's eyes were instantly subdued by the puppet behind Fatty Luo. It was just a scene, why did student Gao's puppet style change so much? Old Huang was puzzled. He remembered that Gao Tianming's puppets were rather crude and terrifying. Young people, it's actually very normal to have one or two exquisite puppets by your side. President Qi laughed on the side. But I didn't expect student Gao Tianming's style to be so different. Maybe he's a nerd? A nerd. Old Huang gradually frowned, and he couldn't help looking at Li Qingxi, the headmaster of number 1 Devil Subduing High. Headmaster Li, I didn't expect a student from your school to have this side. As a puppet master, you can actually see a certain personality in a puppet. As the headmaster, Li Qingxi was also stupefied as he stared at the sexy and graceful puppet behind Fatty Luo on the screen. He remembered that his student Gao Tianming didn't have this style at all. What on earth had happened the moment the scene had cut back just now? These were the puppets that Fatty Luo had replaced in the second before the scene had changed. They were made entirely of imitation human skin, and had a nickname, human puppets. Furthermore, they were completely naked, without even a scrap of cloth. Thus, the entire command center now knew that number 1 Devil Subduing High's Gao Tianming wasn't satisfied. Chapter 1168. Actually, Odd Zhua had always felt that Fatty Luo and Dharmaraja had talent for acting. Although the two of them were faking it and weren't punching each other, it still looked very realistic. There was the sound of a foundation establishment cultivator punching. The only thing that didn't fit was the completely different puppet behind Fatty Luo. This was actually a way of contrasting the two. It was like in a detective mystery movie, where the brilliant Sherlock Holmes would be paired with a Watson who kept asking questions. A large part of the reason why Fatty Luo had chosen to destroy Gao Tianming's character was actually to set off Ling Zhenren's temperament. In particular, in contrast, Wang Ling really looked like an ordinary foundation establishment student. Furthermore, Fatty Luo deliberately held back and didn't hit Dharmaraja. It looked as if Dharmaraja, who was playing Wang Ling, was using all kinds of fancy drifting moves, so nimble that it was breathtaking. In a split second, everyone was deeply attracted to Dharmaraja, who was playing Wang Ling. Seeing this, all the headmasters couldn't help praising him. I don't know why, but I feel that this student from number 60 high has an extraordinary temperament, and is very lovable. Wonderful, wonderful. Look at his nimble body technique. He doesn't lose his rhythm when he moves. He can still breathe so calmly in the midst of such violent and repeated changes in position. This kind of rhythm is even better than that of a cultivator with a higher realm. That's right, I agree. Also, did you see that when student Wang Ling was fighting student Gao Tianming, his hair seemed to be standing on end? Stand on end? It wasn't blown by the wind? Look carefully. Classmate Wang Ling was clearly using a lightning-imbued spell that could increase the damage done in close combat. The electric currents coursing through classmate Wang Ling's body could stimulate his 8 extraordinary meridians even in the middle of a fight, causing his strength to rise continuously. Who would have thought that this student from number 60 high, who looks so mediocre, would have such a clear battle mentality? Student Wang Ling is indeed handsome. His hair is standing on end because of the electric current, and he looks like a super scion. Can't help it, he's just a foil to his peers. As the headmasters discussed this, the person who was hurt the most was naturally number 1 Devil Subduing High's headmaster, Li Qingxi. Headmaster Li Qingxi hadn't expected Gao Tianming, who was usually the most sedate person in their school, to suddenly release himself during the competition. He was a boy, after all. He was in his hot-blooded adolescence, and he didn't have a girlfriend. In fact, it was very normal for him to have this kind of thing. But the problem was that you couldn't use it in the competition. Li Qingxi lowered his head and covered his face. As the headmaster, he could not bear to watch the duel in front of him. For a moment, he felt as if he had been reduced to dust. On the side, number 60 high school's headmaster Chen was actually amused. He had already seen that number 1 devil-subduing highs Gao Tianming was the most difficult to deal with among this batch of students, and he had been worried that Gao Tianming would steal the limelight from number 60 high school students. Who would have thought that his persona would suddenly collapse, and everyone in the command room was amused. Moreover, no one chose to take the initiative to ridicule Principal Li Qingxi at this time. This was the most fatal. At this moment, silence spoke louder than words. Sneering in the dark can sometimes hurt people more than saying it out loud. On the other side, the confrontation between the real Wang Ling and Gao Tianming was still going on. Gao Tianming was clearly a little astonished by Wang Ling's overly calm performance. After obtaining the power of Shadow Dao, his puppets had fused with the power of Shadow Image, and were almost inherently intimidating. Even after Wang Zhen's strength was restricted by Heavenly Dao, his battle strength was only at itinerant immortal level, and his hair stood on end when he was intimidated by Gao Tianming's puppets. However, the youngster in front of him only slightly ruffled his bangs. So you're number 60 high's hidden core. Gao Tianming stared at Wang Ling with a particularly solemn expression. He even had reason to suspect that Wang Ling wasn't just at the foundation establishment stage. In that instant, Gao Tianming recalled what Whitehair had said when he had given him the frozen dumplings. Whitehair had told him that if he ran into a guy with dead fish eyes, he should avoid fighting him as much as possible. And now, this dead fish eye had appeared in front of Gao Tianming. When a person suddenly obtained power after longing for it for a long time, they would become inflated. Gao Tianming was a typical example. Wang Ling had already sensed Gao Tianming's intentions when he had climbed to the top of Mist Peak. The other party didn't look like he was going to escape at all. Gao Tianming wasn't very old this year, and was only 16 years old like Wang Ling. But after fusing with the power of Shadow Dao, his cultivation had increased by more than 16 years. His current cultivation was close to 3,000 years. He was stronger than a high-level itinerant immortal, and infinitely close to a true immortal. It had to be noted that the average strength of the headmasters in the command center was only slightly above the soul formation stage. Only a handful of headmasters were at the itinerant immortal level. This was why Wang Nuan's Shadow Dao was so terrifying. It could instantly elevate a foundation establishment cultivator to such a frightening level. Wang Ling had once thought that his unborn little sister might be joking with him. This kind of leap in realm was really a little too exaggerated. But Wang Ling was very willing to make a move this time. Because in his opinion, Gao Tianming was indeed someone worthy of careful study. Gao Tianming was also a person who had fused with the power of Shadow Dao, and had fused it very thoroughly. Furthermore, it was all within his control. The people who had eaten the frozen dumplings earlier had suppressed part of their strength. For example, Jing Tianxiang, who had eaten the frozen dumplings in order to clear his son's name and inadvertently increased his strength, ultimately overturning the case of magic treasure plagiarism. He hadn't dared fully release his strength, because he was worried that the power of Shadow Dao would be too strong, and would ultimately cause him to lose control of his heart and be consigned to eternal damnation. But Gao Tianming's fusion was actually better than what the previous people had encountered. Wang Ling felt that this might be because Gao Tianming himself had a certain psychological flaw. Thus, Wang Ling was deeply curious about Gao Tianming. It hadn't been easy for him to encounter someone with complete Shadow Dao form. He even wanted to study Gao Tianming's Shadow Dao space in depth and analyze what the structure of the space inside was like. But at that moment, the 12 resource collection kite puppets that Gao Tianming was controlling suddenly started to move. Like pointers, they spun at high speed the moment they received an order. Then, they opened their mouths and spat out a screen of light. This was the scene construction spell, which was combined with the power of Shadow Dao. It was similar to an advanced illusion spell, which could freeze the scene of Gao Tianming and Wang Ling's confrontation. But the truth was that there was a sealed space inside that outsiders couldn't detect. In other words, the entire space had already been locked from the inside. Furthermore, with the power of Shadow Dao, a heavenly Dao-level illusion detection spell couldn't pry into the truth at all. "You've already fallen into my hands, classmate Wang Ling." Gao Tianming stared at Wang Ling and curled his lips confidently. He thought that Wang Ling was already in his pocket and that he could do whatever he wanted. But little did he know, who on earth was the one who could do whatever he wanted. Chapter 1169. The moment he faced Gao Tianming, Wang Ling had already thought of more than 3,000 ways to get rid of Gao Tianming perfectly. But Gao Tianming wasn't evil, it was just that the power of Shadow Dao had infinitely magnified the dark and distracting thoughts in his heart, so much so that it was now too late for him to recover. Wang Ling didn't intend to kill Gao Tianming, he just wanted to take back the power of Shadow Dao. As long as he did so, the darkness in Gao Tianming's heart would fade. This was the best method Wang Ling could think of before the situation really escalated. At that moment, Gao Tianming had pretended to be smart and had sealed off the entire battlefield, but he had ended up helping Wang Ling instead. With no one around to disturb him, Wang Ling could use his ability without worry. He took a step forward. It was only a single step, but a tremendous pressure instantly fell like a waterfall of the Milky Way, forming an overwhelming pressure that made it difficult for Gao Tianming to breathe. You! Gao Tianming stared at Wang Ling, his face full of astonishment and disbelief. In his opinion, this should have been a good way to use the power of Shadow Dao to catch a turtle in a jar. But he never thought that this turtle would actually be him. This wasn't the power of a foundation establishment cultivator. Are you and I the same kind of person? Gao Tianming looked at the pair of red dead fish eyes in front of him and tried to confirm the look in Wang Ling's king's eye, but he couldn't get an answer. The same kind of person? Of course they were different. Although Gao Tianming's power of Shadow Dao was better, it wasn't even 1/1000th of Wang Wan's power. Wang Ling had already analyzed Shadow Dao before. Although he wasn't very proficient at it, he had already gotten a glimpse of the basics. Wang Ling now had the support of 4 Great Dao. Major Dao, Heavenly Dao. This was what Wang Ling had been born with. Divine Dao, this was what he had learned after spending 2 long minutes on Divine Dao Star. Fate Dao, this was what Wang Ling had comprehended when he had captured Bai Yuquan in prison. Shadow Dao, in order to destroy those frozen dumplings, and for the sake of his little sister Wang Wan, Wang Ling had specially studied it. These were the 4 Great Dao that Wang Ling currently mastered. In fact, there was actually another Outer Dao that could make one immune to all kinds of magic attacks. However, strictly speaking, the Outer Dao could not be classified as a Great Dao. It was just a branch of the Heavenly Dao. Previously, Bai Youquan's father, President Bai Zhe, had thought that he had mastered a Great Dao, but the power of Outer Dao was still far inferior to the Heavenly Dao. So in summary, compared with Wang Ling, Gao Tianming's Shadow Dao couldn't be considered phoenix feathers and qilin horns. It could only be considered a chicken feather, and a chick at that. Unfortunately, Gao Tianming clearly didn't know what true power was. It was just as Nan Yixio had said. Gao Tianming was a crazy man. Until the very last moment, when Gao Tianming truly felt the gap between their strengths, when he truly despaired and gave up, this person would definitely continue to make mistakes. In this world, I alone am enough. In the next moment, Gao Tianming attacked hysterically as he manipulated 2 puppets to flank Wang Ling from left and right. This was a puppet, Slayer, that was even more lethal and faster than Splitter, which had dealt with Wang Zhen previously. The more dexterous mechanism design allowed the hook-shaped golden wheels at the Slayer's waist to spin rapidly as it approached. Wang Ling could see that Gao Tianming was intent on killing him. With the power of Shadow Dao attached to them, the gears on the 2 Slayers could now spin more than 100 and 300 million times per second. This kind of power was enough to split gold and break stone. It could even split a mountain in half. But this speed still couldn't compare to Wang Ling's hula hoop speed when he was 7 years old. Back then, when Wang Ling was far from being as powerful as he was now, his hula hoop speed had already reached 200 million times per second. He had even been able to directly escape gravity by hula hoop, and directly take off from the ground like a helicopter propeller, rushing out of the earth for the first time. But as the saying went, a real man doesn't boast about his past exploits. Those were all the tricks he had played when he was young, and Wang Ling disdained showing them off in front of outsiders. But it was precisely because of his hula hoop experience back then, because the hula hoop was often broken, Wang Ling later learned the skill of hula hoop in the void. Now, without the hula hoop, Wang Ling could only rely on the strength of his waist to twist and turn, and with just 10% of his strength, he could spin more than 1 billion times per second. Thus, when Gao Tianming controlled the slayers to attack, Wang Ling almost subconsciously started to twist his slender waist at a high frequency. Because the speed was so fast, Gao Tianming could actually see Wang Ling's entire body in a blurry and hazy state. As Wang Ling twisted and turned, the entire top of Mist Peak began to sway slightly, just like a high-frequency ghost animal video on Bilibili. When the two slayers collided with Wang Ling at a speed of 1 billion times per second, there was naturally only one outcome: death and destruction. When the slayers exploded next to Wang Ling and its parts disintegrated one by one, Gao Tianming simply couldn't believe his eyes. A gear the size of a palm fell to the ground and rolled to Gao Tianming's feet. When Gao Tianming picked it up, he was actually scalded by the heat from the gear's body. He hadn't clearly seen what Wang Ling had done at all, and his slayers had actually directly exploded just like that. "What on earth did you do, Wang Ling?" Gao Tianming roared angrily. He was very loud, and his volume was extremely intimidating, like a mental patient yelling hysterically at someone. But in Wang Ling's eyes, this was just incompetent rage. "Physical attacks have no effect on me." This was the first time he had spoken to Gao Tianming since the start of the battle, and it could be considered a kind reminder. It was only after seeing the Slayer that Wang Ling recalled the idiotic move he had developed back then that he had seen the Slayer. It was especially idiotic when it was rotated at a low speed. But when the speed of rotation increased, others wouldn't be able to clearly see what he was doing. Moreover, his body had become a sage long ago. Even if he didn't twist his waist, the Slayers would just be seeking their own destruction if they hit him. "I'm going to turn you into my collection." Gao Tianming's eyes were red as he looked at Wang Ling. Although he didn't know why Wang Ling, a Foundation establishment cultivator, was as strong as him, he already had the idea of turning Wang Ling into a puppet figurine. "Become my puppet, classmate Wang Ling," Gao Tianming sneered. With a snap of his fingers, his shadow gradually rose from the ground and materialized behind him. This was Gao Tianming's shadow image, a clown on strings emitting an evil aura. Chapter 1170. The evil clown, who was as tall as Gao Tianming, gave off a disgusting smell from head to toe. It had a blood-red nose, horrifying split lips, and even the moles at the corners of its eyes were like sharp blades that could cut a person's heart. It was as if it could instantly plunge a person into a terrifying atmosphere. Hanging from the puppet clown's head were 4 strings. These strings were none other than 4 pieces of intestines. The scene looked a little disgusting, but it was in fact just a psychological effect caused by the shadow image. At the same time, it also proved that Gao Tianming had sunk too deep. Once his inner demon was activated, the dark side of his heart would directly reflect on the shadow image. So, if the power of Shadow Dao was used normally, the shadow image would probably be something like a weapon spirit. It might not be as good-looking as Jinka or Mysterious Sea, but at the very least, it would be a humanoid creature that looked normal. Wang Ling frowned at the horrifying scene in front of him. His first reaction after seeing this scene was to give the remaining packets of braised intestine-flavored crispy noodle snacks at home to the Heavenly Dao as an equivalent exchange. After all, he was still a 16-year-old kid. It was inevitable that he would feel a little nauseous at this kind of scene. So now, Wang Ling was doing his best not to throw up his churning stomach acid. If a drop fell to the ground, given his stomach acid's ability, it might directly burn a hole through the earth. On the other side, looking at Wang Ling clutching his stomach, Gao Tianming thought that his threat was beginning to work. His shadow image was called Puppet Clown, and it had the effect of creating illusions and fear in people's hearts. Once you fell into it, the more you looked at it, the more terrifying it would feel. He felt that it was already impressive that Wang Ling hadn't fainted on the spot. "Student Wang Ling, stop struggling. I'll definitely turn you into my collection." Gao Tianming smiled sinisterly. With a thought, several large intestines flew out of the puppet clown's abdomen to wrap around Wang Ling's limbs. He wanted to drag Wang Ling into the shadow image world. Tentacle play, Wang Ling didn't like to play tentacles with a man. He opened his king's eye and stared at the large intestines flying toward him. As he stared, these large intestines actually slowed down midway. This was the passive effect of the king's eye, "Don't touch me." Once Wang Ling showed a look of resistance, these unknown creatures that tried to approach him would instantly turn to ashes if they still persisted. Therefore, these large intestines instantly stopped after decelerating in midair. Under Wang Ling's king's eye, they didn't dare take half a step forward. As a shadow image, the clown puppet was controlled by Gao Tianming's will, but it also had a certain level of intelligence and wouldn't do anything to harm itself. This was because once the shadow image appeared, it would be bound to the body of the original owner. Any damage the shadow image received would be reflected back to the original owner. Gao Tianming was clearly surprised by the puppet's hesitation. He had never encountered such a situation before, and he couldn't imagine that his shadow image would actually be afraid. Not only was it synchronized on the physical level, but it was also synchronized on the mental level. At that moment, Gao Tianming could clearly sense that his clown puppet was trembling slightly with fear in its heart. In the next moment, his king's eye turned into a sharp sword that directly stabbed at the clown puppet. He used his own force to tear open the crack leading to the shadow image world. Wang Ling knew that a lot of people were still trapped in the shadow image's internal world. If he directly got rid of the clown puppet now, those people would die along with it. At this point in the battle, Gao Tianming finally deeply felt that Wang Ling's strength was almost beyond his understanding. Previously, he had controlled the shadow image to swallow people, but this person in front of him had forcibly used his own ability to tear open a crack like a roasted duck, and then stepped in. It was when Wang Ling entered the shadow image world that Gao Tianming truly felt like he had a mental breakdown. The so-called shadow image world was in fact a small world space constructed by the shadow image using its own mental energy. Now that Wang Ling had entered this small world, it was the same as forcibly stepping into this spiritual domain. When this behemoth of energy suddenly poured into the spiritual world, Gao Tianming fell to his knees with a splitting headache. He was like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered as he curled up on the ground, clutching his head as his entire body twitched with a headache. Wang Ling had forced his way in, which would definitely cause some damage to his mind. But in terms of Dao, this was also Gao Tianming's own doing. Who told him to turn so many people into puppets and put them into his sweatshop in the shadow image world? In the puppet sweatshop, the people who had already been turned into collectibles toiled endlessly like machines. Strapped to their bodies, they carried one brick after another to where they needed to be built. They were both collectibles and cheap labor. After entering the shadow image world, Wang Ling was even more aware of how terrifying the dark power in the depths of Gao Tianming's heart was. In this puppet factory, Wang Ling could sense a power that could make people lose themselves. All the people who had been turned into puppets here had given up struggling and resisting, and their human thoughts would be extracted little by little. They would gradually forget their own names, forget the people around them, and then gradually lose all memories of being human. Most of the people who had been turned into puppets by Gao Tianming were Foundation Establishment students. Foundation Establishment cultivators had weaker minds and willpower, and were more likely to be assimilated by this spiritual world. The most severely affected people had already completely lost themselves here. Wang Ling spotted a familiar figure in the line of people carrying bricks in front of him, who was being whipped and tortured. Everything was as Wang Ling had thought. He had sensed Wang Zhen's aura disappear earlier, and sure enough, it was because Gao Tianming had plotted against him, and he had been sucked into the shadow image world to become a puppet. He saw Wang Zhen turn into a puppet on strings. It was as if he was being strung up by 4 uncontrollable steel wires, and his body was constantly working uncontrollably. Wang Ling just stood at a distance and watched this scene. He didn't know if Wang Zhen had already been assimilated, or how much of his will he still had left. But he saw that this man's eyes were different from those of the other puppets. There was a resolute look in his eyes, as if he hadn't given up thinking about how to leave this place. Until the moment when their gazes collided. Wang Zhen's spirit was suddenly shaken, and he instantly became excited. Ling Zhenren. He shouted in his heart, completely believing that Wang Ling could hear his thoughts. Wang Ling was about to praise Wang Zhen for actually not losing himself in such a terrifying shadow image world, when Wang Zhen unexpectedly said, "Ling Zhenren, you're finally here. I've been thinking about how to not lose myself in this space, so I deliberately acted lowly here and asked for a beating. The moment the whip hit me, I felt comfortable and remembered everything." Hearing this, Wang Ling slowly let out a question mark. Why did this guy sound like he was enjoying it? Chapter 1171. The reason why Wang Zhen hadn't lost himself when he was trapped in the sweatshop was that he actually enjoyed the feeling of being beaten. Wang Ling couldn't help sucking in a breath of cold air when he heard this earth-shattering reason. It could only be said that Wang Zhen was in the end Wang Zhen. As a man who had been beaten up since he was a child, but who had still tenaciously survived to this day, Wang Ling couldn't help feeling deeply moved by Wang Zhen's experiences. There were so many geniuses in the world, and Wang Zhen actually hadn't started out as good as them. But after being beaten up, Wang Zhen's strong desire to survive had caused his hidden potential to burst forth, and he had finally awakened it after being beaten up round after round, and this was the reason why Wang Zhen had become stronger. A person's character was formed at a young age, and a large part of it was also because of the family environment. Wang Zhen's habit of being beaten up would probably never change in this lifetime. In some sense, Wang Ling felt that the irascible Miss Lu and Wang Zhen were really a good match. Wang Zhen was a meat shield, and Lu Qingyi was born with a fiery temper. Wang Zhen had been used to all kinds of beatings since he was a child, so his endurance was naturally better than that of an ordinary person. If these two people were together, it would be like a balance of yin and yang, but sometimes, emotional matters couldn't be forced. Wang Ling wasn't Mr. Matchmaker, and he wouldn't force his way into other people's relationships. Even if he randomly chose a couple, he had to follow the basic rules. In the next moment, Wang Ling raised his hand to cast a spell, using his current understanding of Shadow Dao to reconstruct this shadow image world. He had to finish this battle quickly, and couldn't drag things out for too long in this shadow image world. The longer he dragged things out, the greater the damage to Gao Tianming's spirit. After casting the spell for about 3 seconds, Wang Ling snapped his fingers, and all the puppets in the puppet factory in front of him were cleanly cut off. Then, their bodies began to turn into particles of light and swiftly disappear. This process was very fast, and in the blink of an eye, Wang Zhen had already returned to reality. All the rescued students were lying neatly on the ground. The change in world had put a lot of pressure on them, and shuttling back and forth had caused a lack of oxygen, which was the main reason why they had fainted. So Wang Zhen was the only one awake. At that moment, Wang Ling stretched out his hand to support Gao Tianming's forehead. Gao Tianming knelt on the ground and cried out in pain, but no one could hear his gut-wrenching voice. A few minutes later, Wang Ling pulled out a black shadow from Gao Tianming's body. It smelled of evil, and under Wang Ling's guidance, it first lingered around his fingertips before slowly coalescing in the center of his palm into a black ball the size of an egg. Finally, Wang Ling pressed down with a flip of his hand, and on the side, Wang Zhen saw several golden chains emerge from the air to lock the black ball in place before dragging it into the air. At this point, the seal was a success. Heaven Dao Lock. Wang Zhen recognized the origin of those chains. These golden chains originated from the power of the 6 main heavenly Dao. Wang Zhen had always known that Wang Ling was very strong, and that they weren't on the same level, but the appearance of the heavenly Dao lock had still startled him. Nowadays, it wasn't uncommon to see people with heavenly Dao, especially in the domain of the gods, where heavenly Dao ability users were as numerous as the hairs on an ox. But knowing heavenly Dao and understanding heavenly Dao were two different things. Those with heavenly Dao would never dare say that they understood heavenly Dao. There were countless mysteries of heavenly Dao. One universe had 3,000 heavenly Dao, and 10 universes had 30,000 heavenly Dao. Among these 30,000 heavenly Dao, it wasn't easy for some people to spend their entire lives pursuing just one and prying into the mysteries of heavenly Dao. As for the so-called Heaven Dao Lock, it was in fact a symbol of complete domination and control over the power of heavenly Dao. Ling Zhenren, who on earth are you? Wang Zhen started to feel curious about Wang Ling's identity. Wang Ling, but the truth was that even Wang Ling himself didn't know who he was. Who the hell knew why he was so strong? And the most frightening thing was that he wasn't someone who had been reborn at all. He didn't have a setting for rebirth at all. Seeing that Wang Ling had nothing to say, Wang Zhen knew that his words might have offended him, so he didn't pursue the matter. But he still had doubts about Gao Tianming. Why didn't Ling Zhenren directly destroy this evil power? Instead, he chose to seal it. Seal it. This was the best method Wang Ling could think of at the moment. He explained this to Wang Zhen telepathically. Because Gao Tianming's situation was a little special, his shadow Dao was too deeply integrated. If his shadow image was directly destroyed, Gao Tianming would also die. Thus, choosing to seal it was the safest method. Gao Tianming himself wouldn't be affected by the seal, but would be unable to use the power of shadow Dao. After rescuing everyone, the first thing Wang Ling did was to use the Great Memory Spell's memory replacement ability to completely replace everyone's memories of shadow Dao. In essence, Gao Tianming was also a victim. He wasn't a bad person by nature, but because of his intense competitiveness and desire to improve himself, he had been used by people with ulterior motives. Next, the key was to ferret out the mastermind behind the scenes. Wang Ling had initially wanted to let nature take its course. Based on his past experience, he knew that someone would definitely stir up trouble in this national competition. But he had never expected that this troublemaker would actually involve Wang Yuan's power of shadow Dao. This immediately made Wang Ling feel a sense of crisis. The power of shadow Dao wasn't stable yet, and abuse of it could lead to a devastating crisis. Using his unborn little sister to do bad things was something Wang Ling couldn't forgive no matter what. I need your help. At that moment, Wang Ling turned to Wang Zhen. Ling Zhenren, please speak. Wang Zhen was terrified. Wang Ling's task was very simple. He wanted Wang Zhen to be a human radar responsible for searching for other people in this competition who had the power of shadow Dao. Wang Ling had pretty much mastered shadow Dao, but if he used this power himself, he might lose control. So the best way was for Wang Zhen to check on his behalf. It's my duty. Wang Zhen agreed without hesitation. He didn't need to eat any frozen dumplings, and just stretched out his hand to touch Wang Zhen's forehead. In the next breath, it was as if the shadow under Wang Zhen's feet had been imbued with some kind of magic, and it visibly became three-dimensional before finally turning into a shadow image in the shape of a person. A normal shadow image was in human form. This was a burly man with very thick muscles. The burly man only wore a pair of white underpants, and the clothes on his body were quite unique. They were actually coiled ropes. This was Wang Zhen's exclusive shadow image, called Man Tied Up. After seeing the shadow image clearly, Wang Ling sighed in his heart, as expected of you. Chapter 1172. Every shadow image had its own name. The reason why a shadow image normally took the form of a human was because it represented what a person's heart longed for, and the shadow image's abilities were derived from that heart's longing. Tied Man Wang Ling used the King's Eye to test Tied Man's strength. If the shadow image was divided into 10 levels of strength, Tied Man was at level 6. Its advantages were long hands and strong growth potential. Although it was only level 6 now, if Wang Zhen used this strength properly, it was still possible for it to level up in the future. Is this my shadow image? Why does it feel so wretched? Wang Zhen stared at this muscular man wrapped in ropes and felt that what he was seeing was a little unreal. He was such an upright person, but his shadow image was actually like this. The point was that Wang Zhen thought that his sexual orientation was normal, so why was his shadow image such a muscular otaku who was even fatter than Kuxuan? The people behind the scenes are in this 9 Dragon Mountain area. If I make a move, it'll be too obvious. You're responsible for finding them. Wang Ling spoke telepathically to Wang Zhen. He had activated Wang Zhen's shadow image so that Wang Zhen could secretly search for their whereabouts. Then, Wang Ling brought over one of Gao Tianming's puppets and cast a spell called the Great Illusion spell on it. This was a real illusion that could confuse anyone's eyes. Wang Ling turned Gao Tianming's puppet into Wang Zhen's appearance. Although it looked a little wooden, it was enough to pass off as the real thing. I'll leave it to you. Wang Ling then left with this puppet which had turned into a fake Wang Zhen. Don't worry, Ling Zhenren. Wang Zhen replied after confirming their gazes. But to ensure the success of this operation, Wang Ling had arranged for 2 other people to assist Wang Zhen. Thus, after Wang Zhen watched Wang Ling leave the barrier, Loopy Toad and Little Silver jumped out from the side and quickly helped Wang Zhen change into the Special Forces uniform. You're not Ling Zhenren's. Although Loopy Toad had already turned into a human, Wang Zhen was still able to quickly recognize that the person in front of him was Loopy Toad itself, judging from its emerald green hair and its human form. We received Master's order to help you uncover the people behind the scenes, Little Silver replied swiftly. The key now was to find out who the mastermind was. He faced Wang Zhen and saw the shadow image behind him. So this is what your shadow image looks like. It doesn't match you at all. So your heart yearns for bondage? Wang Zhen was a little embarrassed. It's all a misunderstanding, Little Silver, no need to explain, we all understand. Saying that, Little Silver also showed his shadow image. Wang Ling had helped them activate it remotely just now. Little Silver's silhouette was very normal and also in human form. This was a vigilante with waist-length hair and dead fish eyes. He wore a hood over his head and was clad in thick leather armor. However, this vigilante's weapon was neither a sword nor an arrow. Instead, it was a collar around his neck, so, the collar is a weapon? The corner of Wang Zhen's mouth twitched. Apart from his more normal appearance, Little Silver's shadow image didn't seem much better. More importantly, this was a collar. This meant that Little Silver wanted to be caught in the collar. I really want someone, it's best if it's Master who can take me for a walk on the streets. Little Silver spoke his innermost thoughts. He had always had this desire in his heart, but unfortunately, as one of the few holy beasts left in the world, Little Silver had to abide by the principle of keeping a low profile like Wang Ling. He didn't want to be hunted down and slaughtered like Dog Saint because of the rumors about the heart of a holy beast back then. The last remaining bone had been developed into the Bone King, which had fallen into Loopy Toad's hands. The power of the shadow image symbolized a person's inner desire. Thus, it wasn't too strange for a vigilante to wear a collar around his neck. It was just that Wang Zhen was curious to see how it would play an actual role in a real battle. Then let's go, Loopy Toad said at that moment. Aren't you going to show me? I'll leave you with something to remember, croak. Gao Tianming is still unconscious. What should we do? We'll walk out of the barrier, and the image in the command center will switch to this place. Dharmaraja and Fatty Luo are acting, and the ending of the battle will be a fierce collision between Little Master Ling and Gao Tianming, which will lead to an explosion that will cause someone on Mist Peak to fall unconscious, Loopy Toad said at that moment. The script for this battle had been predetermined, and had already been arranged clearly. Thus, after Wang Zhen left with Loopy Toad and Little Silver, the protective talismans on everyone on Mist Peak were triggered. As the protective golden light soared into the sky, the teachers patrolling nearby swiftly rushed over. At this point, the students from No. 1 Devil Subduing High and the other schools were eliminated. In the command center, Headmaster Li Qingxi had a vexed expression on his face. It was only the second day. Their No. 1 Devil Subduing High's hot favorite to win the championship was already gone. Where's Wang Ling? Why can't I see classmate Wang Ling? When the image switched back to the real scene, Headmaster Li Qingxi shouted excitedly. He stared at the scene of the search and rescue, his eyes sweeping the area for those dead fish eyes, but he couldn't find any trace of Wang Ling. Old Li, you're anxious. On the side, Headmaster Chen smiled slightly. Obviously, if Wang Ling isn't here, it means that he was sent flying by the explosion just now, and his life isn't in danger. This is the top of Mist Peak. How can he not be in danger after being sent flying off a cliff? Headmaster Li was very agitated. He desperately hoped that Wang Ling would also be eliminated, otherwise No. 1 Devil Subduing High would lose all face. An alliance of so many schools had actually been directly wiped out by one person. This was simply unimaginable. Have you forgotten the terrain of Mist Peak? Headmaster Chen analyzed the situation. I'm guessing that student Wang Ling must have been affected by the special terrain of Mist Peak after being sent flying. The moment he fell, the nearby airflow rose up. The moment he fell, the surrounding airflow rose up, causing air resistance to increase, and in the end, he landed smoothly. How is that possible? Li Qingxi couldn't believe it. Was this the power of number 60 High's mascot? Headmaster Li slumped in his seat, unable to come back to his senses for a long time. Very quickly, Headmaster Chen's words were confirmed by a screen in the command center, because when the image switched back to number 60 High's camp, someone saw that Wang Ling had already returned to the camp with the previously missing Wang Zhen. On the screen, Wang Ling looked a little dirty. It was clear that he had just been through a big battle. Since he was putting on a show, he had to do it to the end. Of course, Wang Ling wasn't injured. He had just used the great spell of filth to make himself dirty. This spell wasn't meant to be used in this kind of place, and was only used to make gourmet food. For example, dirty buns. Chapter 1173. After Wang Ling safely returned to number 60 High's camp with the fake Wang Zhen, Super Chen heaved a long sigh of relief when he saw Wang Ling reappear. You're finally back, damn. I heard from Nan Yixio that you went to Mist Peak alone to fight Gao Tianming. You're that brave? Did you cheat? Wang Ling. As an outstanding successor to cultivation socialism, Wang Ling had always been too lazy to use cheats as impractical as this. Since he was a cheat, there was no need for him to use it. Wang Ling was worried that he wouldn't be able to explain what had happened just now. Odd Zhuo was naturally prepared for this. He had arranged for a member of the Special Forces, who was on his way to rescue Mist Peak, to deliberately pass above number 60 High's camp. Sure enough, he was intercepted by the students here. Teacher, what on earth happened at Mist Peak? Nan Yixio took the initiative to ask. He felt that it definitely wouldn't be easy for Wang Ling to bring Wang Zhen back. Who was Wang Ling? Number 60 High's mascot with the weakest combat strength. To be able to snatch Wang Zhen back from a lunatic like Gao Tianming, he must have negotiated some conditions. But at the same time, Nan Yixio felt a little puzzled, because it was obvious that this member of the Special Forces had been heading in the direction of Mist Peak, which proved that a big battle had probably taken place there. A student with the surname Gao caused a huge explosion, and all the students there were eliminated, said the member who had been arranged to pass by. All eliminated? Then Wang Ling. Oh, you mean that student with dead fish eyes? He was blown away by the blast of the explosion, and wasn't affected. After saying that, the member directly left on his flying sword. Hearing this, Nan Yixio and the others were suddenly enlightened. Because of the special terrain of Mist Peak, there was an updraft around it, so when people landed around Mist Peak, it was as if they were equipped with parachutes. It was also because of this that Wang Ling had been able to land safely after being blown away by the blast of air, and had even brought Wang Zhen back with him in the end. After sorting out the cause and effect of the incident, Nan Yixio looked at Wang Ling in astonishment. Everyone said that this was number 60 High's mascot. Now that Nan Yixio had come back to his senses, seeing was indeed believing. As expected of Wang Ling. The legendary mascot could really be this lucky. As expected of classmate Wang Ling. Nan Yixio couldn't help giving him a thumbs up as he marveled at Wang Ling's amazing performance. On the other side, Lotus Sun had actually been worried about Wang Ling's condition. Now that she saw him return safe and sound with Wang Zhen, she breathed a sigh of relief in her heart. She had been especially nervous when she hadn't seen Wang Ling just now, and was even ready to call for the family's personal guards to go into the mountains and search for him. This was a privilege that only Lotus Sun had. Because of Shadow Stream's previous assassination attempt on Lotus Sun, President Xi had in fact approved Huaguo Water Curtain Group's internal personnel to protect Lotus Sunday. Now, these people were actually waiting not too far away. They couldn't intervene in the competition, but they could protect Lotus Sun if necessary. But she actually didn't care too much about her own safety. As long as Wang Ling was fine, she could accept it. Lotus Sun hadn't arranged for these bodyguards entirely out of her own consideration, there were so many students at number 60 high, and as the team leader, she naturally had the responsibility to protect them. As long as you're fine. So, when she saw that everyone was safe and sound, she smiled. Out of the corner of her eye, she looked at Wang Ling's face, which was as tranquil as ever, and felt a trace of peace in her heart. The night of the second day of the national competition passed peacefully with Wang Ling's return. All the major peaks on Nine Dragon Mountain knew that number 60 high had sent a mascot to get rid of Mist Peak's camp, which was led by number 1 Devil Subduing High. While everyone was astonished, they took all kinds of precautions against Fire Peak. Many camps had previously planned to besiege Fire Peak, but all of them had been cancelled. The main reason was that they felt that number 60 high was a little strange. It seemed that nothing good would ever happen to them. In the middle of the night, in the girls' tent, Lotus Sun sensed that Lu Qingyi was a little uneasy. In many cases, girls' minds were transparent, and they could understand each other's thoughts. It's my turn to keep watch. Sitting next to Lu Qingyi with a blanket draped over her, Lotus Sun served her the hot fruit tea that she had prepared earlier. Lu Qingyi stared blankly for a moment, then reached out to take the tea. As she held it in her palm, the fragrant tea leaves gave off steam. After inhaling the sweet aroma, Lu Qingyi felt a lot calmer. Sugar could stimulate dopamine, which could help people get rid of anxiety. The two women sat side by side, hugging their knees as they held the hot tea. Lu Qingyi drank the fruit tea with a heavy heart. Then, Lotus Sun asked straight away, "Are you worried about classmate Wang Zhen?" "Of course not." Don't talk nonsense." These words were obviously spot on. Lu Qingyi's face instantly turned red, and even the tips of her ears turned red. "Actually, sometimes, if you really care, you should go and take a look," Lotus Sun reminded her. I just think there's something wrong with Wang Zhen." Lu Qingyi lowered her head with a depressed expression. "After he came back, he didn't say anything, nor did he bicker with me. It's a little strange." Lotus Sun nodded. Even she could tell that classmate Wang Zhen's behavior had become a little wooden, and he was in a daze like a wooden man. Could he have been scared silly by Gao Tianming? "I heard that the explosion at Mist Peak was pretty violent. If it wasn't for the protective golden talisman, he would have been seriously injured." Lotus Sun guessed. Lu Qingyi didn't respond. She was well aware that the whole story probably wasn't that simple. Wang Zhen was thick-skinned and coarse. Lu Qingyi could indeed feel his character from living with him in Wei Ji's house. Actually, after getting along with him for a while, she didn't think he was as annoying as he seemed. This person who had come down from the domain of the gods with the same goal of escaping marriage as her, could even be quite reliable sometimes. At the very least, he made her feel responsible as a man. Emotions had always been a very complicated matter. Lu Qingyi felt that this wasn't something a young girl could understand. There was an age gap between her and Lotus Sun, so Lu Qingyi wasn't willing to share her worries with anyone. But Lotus Sun had hit the nail on the head. As a result, Lu Qingyi gradually relaxed her guard. Maybe she really was too concerned about age? What does it feel like to like someone? Lu Qingyi asked in a low voice. When you like someone, you're always concerned about them and worried about them. Even if they're looking at the sky, you're worried that the stars will fall and hit them. Lotus Sun said to Lu Qingyi as she looked at Wang Ling, who was looking up at the night sky. Chapter 1174. When Lotus Sun said this, Wang Ling was gazing at the night sky. Although she spoke very quietly, he still heard her. The expression on his face didn't change, and he looked a little wooden as he twitched his ears. Wang Ling enjoyed this quiet time very much. Of course, he wasn't looking at the sky simply to gaze at the starry sky, but to prevent the giant meteorites from invading Earth. Late at night, when no one knew, Wang Ling would often observe the movements near Earth. Once he encountered a meteorite on a trajectory that was destined to collide with the Earth, he would use the great sky-gazing spell like he was doing now, and use the power of his king's eye to send it flying back. Thus, when a lot of scientists carried out astronomical observations, they would find that the meteorites that were supposed to collide with the Earth deviated due to the influence of another force of gravity. It was very likely that this was Wang Ling's doing. Wang Ling had been silently maintaining world peace all this time. On the other side, the fake Wang Zhen that Wang Ling had created using Gao Tianming's puppets sat not far away and was also gazing at the sky. Lu Qingyi and the others couldn't see through this level of illusion at all, even if they felt it through skin contact, because this kind of powerful illusion made it feel especially real. Of course, this wasn't without its drawbacks. It was indeed a little wooden. This was because the puppet itself didn't have spiritual intelligence. It could only change its appearance, but not its intelligence. It might be better to use the Great Separation spell to create a clone of Wang Zhen, whose personality would be closer to the original Wang Zhen's, but this way, Wang Zhen's battle strength would be reduced. The enemy that Wang Zhen was about to face could be said to be extraordinarily powerful. If Wang Zhen's battle strength was reduced in this situation, it wouldn't be good for him. So he had no other choice. But what Wang Ling didn't expect was that eldest Miss Lu, who had been bickering with Wang Zhen all this time, suddenly seemed to be concerned about his condition. This puzzled Wang Ling. Their relationship should have been one of hostility and hostility, but now it seemed that it had developed into a more complicated relationship. On the cliff, Wang Ling used the great sky-gazing spell to clean up the giant meteorites that were speeding toward Earth. He got up and brushed the dust off his butt, then left the space for Lu Qingyi, who was anxiously waiting behind him. On the other side, after struggling in her heart for a long time, Lu Qingyi finally sat next to Wang Zhen at Lotus Sun's encouragement. She looked at Wang Zhen's lifeless face, and her heart suddenly ached for him. A good person, how did he become a little fool who was like a vegetative person? Wang Zhen. Lu Qingyi tried to call out, but the fake Wang Zhen didn't respond at all. Wang Ling observed the two of them in secret. At the entrance to the boys' tent, he noticed that Lotus Sun was also secretly watching them from the entrance to the girls' tent. He could see that Lotus Sun's face was clearly a little red, as if there was some envy in it. Dozens of seconds later, Lu Qingyi very naturally leaned her head on Wang Zhen's shoulder in the night breeze on the edge of the cliff. On the other side, Wang Zhen, who was carrying out a mission with Little Silver and Loopy Toad, inexplicably felt a heavy weight on his shoulders, as if an invisible weight was pressing down on them. "Are you nervous?" Little Silver sensed that Wang Zhen's expression seemed especially grave. "A little." Wang Zhen nodded and frowned. In theory, he shouldn't be feeling this heavy. Could it be that this was the first time Ling Zhenren had personally appointed him to carry out a mission, and he was feeling too much pressure? It was the same when I received a mission from Master for the first time. Just relax. In any case, if we really can't solve it, Master will always show up at the most suitable time, Little Silver said. Ling Zhenren, will he really take action? Wang Zhen was a little stunned. He had thought that this mission was Wang Ling's test for him, and he had to succeed. Now that he heard Little Silver's idea, he instantly felt the happiness of having a powerful backer behind him. But Wang Zhen would still take this mission seriously. He represented the domain of the gods. If someone from the domain of the gods couldn't even solve a problem on Earth, that would truly be a disgrace to the domain of the gods. People could have backers, but they couldn't rely on them forever. They still had to move forward step by step with a humble and peaceful heart. You've probably run into very strong opponents in the domain of the gods, right? The three of them sped through the jungle, leaping from tree trunk to tree trunk as they hovered in the air, nimbly using the surrounding terrain to cover themselves. As long as you had the power of Shadow Dao, you could freely use the shadows to hide your figure and even your aura. The power of Shadow Dao is really amazing. The more Wang Zhen felt about it, the more he felt how powerful Shadow Dao was. As a great Dao, Shadow Dao's shortcomings were very obvious, but this was because Wang Yuan hadn't been born yet, so Wang Yuan couldn't control Shadow Dao very well. However, the advantage of Shadow Dao was even more obvious. It could strengthen one's shadow and turn it into combat strength, so that it could catch the enemy off guard and injure them in battle. I have a feeling that our enemy will be very strong, Loopy Toad said as they moved forward. Loopy Toad said as they moved forward. As far as it knew, Wang Ling had never asked them to individually strengthen each of them before carrying out a mission. This proved that Wang Ling had a feeling that the enemy they were going to face would be very troublesome. I know. Wang Zhen nodded solemnly. So far, this mastermind behind the scenes had resurrected a number of people who were already dead, including vicious dark network criminals as well as vengeful spirits of the dead who wreaked havoc in the dark. Their current understanding of the other party was indeed very limited. Resurrection definitely wasn't the other party's only ability. If the other party also has Shadow Dao, what kind of ability would it be? Wang Zhen suddenly asked a question worth thinking about. We won't know until we meet him. Little Silver and Loopy Toad were also worried. Because they didn't know the other party, they didn't know what on earth would happen next. I have a guess, Wang Zhen said at that moment. Let's hear it, asked Loopy Toad. Bringing the dead back to life is a heaven-defying act. There's bound to be a price to pay for using such a forbidden spell. The other party has resurrected so many people, logically speaking, it's impossible for him to be completely fine. Makes sense. But in other words, if the other party is really fine, then there's actually only one other possibility. Wang Zhen frowned. This person might not be from the same dimension as us. Or perhaps he's from a different universe. But Wang Zhen felt that there was actually a loophole in this explanation. Because if the person behind the scenes was someone from a different universe, as the keeper of order, how could Gu Xuanji not sense it? Chapter 1175. Although Wang Zhen already had a hunch that the background of the person behind the scenes definitely wasn't simple, after careful consideration, he felt a chill run down his spine. If even Gu Xuanji couldn't sense this person, then he had to be outside of order. As far as Wang Zhen knew, Wang Ling was the only person in the world who could jump out of order. Don't scare yourself. The enemy may be very strong, but he's definitely within control, said Loopy Toad. In any case, it was a demon king and had been by Wang Ling's side day and night for so long, so it had naturally learned a lot from him. Staying calm was the best way to deal with any unexpected situation. If this person really is outside of order, why did he choose to attack Earth? Loopy Toad raised the key question. While it was terrifying to be outside of order, there was a way to deal with it if it was within the 5 elements. The reason why the other party chose to attack Earth was definitely because there was something on Earth that the other party definitely wanted, and it was highly likely that this person could obtain new abilities or multiply and improve his original abilities. Considering the situation on 9 Dragon Mountain and the information it already knew about the other party's attempt to seize the 9 Dragon Mountain Heavenly Vein, Loopy Toad felt that this matter wasn't as simple as it seemed. The Heavenly Vein might just be a cover. What the other party wanted to seize might be something else. This person was outside of order, and even Gu Xuanji, the keeper of order, couldn't detect him. While 9 Dragon Mountain's Heavenly Vein Master Valve was the source of all the underground spirit veins on Earth, since the other party had an identity that even the keeper of order couldn't detect, why would he activate the Heavenly Vein Master Valve? The only reasonable explanation was that the other party definitely had another purpose. At the very least, activating the Heavenly Vein Master Valve wasn't to absorb the Heavenly Vein. Brother Dog has a point. Wang Zhen agreed with Loopy Toad's conjecture. If the other party simply wanted to seize the Heavenly Vein Master Valve, there was no need for him to go through so much trouble. He had deliberately chosen to stir up trouble during the national competition. It was a little like he was deliberately sending a signal to make people think that he was going to seize the Heavenly Vein. Wang Zhen continued Loopy Toad's analysis. If the other party's goal is to seize the Heavenly Vein, going through so much trouble is a little suspicious. So what do you think is the most reasonable explanation? Everything is a cover. He doesn't want to seize the Heavenly Vein at all. He had chosen to act at this time to make everyone believe that he was here for the vein of the heavens. Apart from that, the most important thing is that the other party purposely resurrected so many people. It's highly likely that they're trying to disrupt our line of sight and stall for time. Speaking up to this point, Wang Zhen, Loopy Toad, and Little Silver practically thought of the same keyword. That's right. It was the hour. Based on the above analysis, the most important condition of the mastermind's plan was all for the sake of time. A specific time, a specific characteristic, and then a specific action. In the world of cultivators, What kind of things needed to be considered in accordance with that hour? An array. Is the other party going to set up an array? Wang Zhen frowned. It was common knowledge that the prerequisites for an array formation were spiritual energy, array diagrams, and seals. These were the three basic requirements for constructing a formation as stated in the Cultivation Encyclopedia. But in fact, apart from these three basic conditions, the cultivation world's almighty figures actually paid more attention to the fourth condition, time. All large-scale formations paid particular attention to the necessity of timing. The 24 hours of a day were divided into 24 hours of feng shui, which was to say, 2 hours were 2 hours. Feng shui changed at different times of the day. That was to say, the reason why large-scale arrays paid so much attention to timing was in fact to absorb more spirit qi of heaven and earth in the right place at the right time, so that the array could resonate with heaven and earth. The other party is pretending to seize the heavenly vein, but in fact doesn't need to seize it at all. He just needs to open the heavenly vein main valve. So, his real goal is to use the power of the heavenly vein to stir up feng shui and set up a huge hidden array? Loopy Toad made its own conjecture after putting all the above together. Then, based on this conjecture, there was a new problem. The other party had summoned so many dead souls and resurrected them in order to stall for time. He had painstakingly planned to pretend to seize the heavenly vein main valve, but in fact, he was secretly plotting to open the heavenly vein, and didn't really want to seize it. Once the conditions were met, he would be able to obtain the spirit power needed to set up the array. Assuming that the other party already had the seals, what was the array diagram? What was an array diagram? This became a new problem. Since he wanted to break the array, he had to first understand the diagram. To set up an array diagram, he naturally had to draw a circle or an oval. But 9 Dragon Mountains terrain was complex, and there didn't seem to be any favorable conditions for setting up an array diagram. Don't tell me it's to use these 9 peaks to circle the mountain dome? Little Silver asked. I don't think so. Wang Zhen shook his head. Using the peaks of 9 Dragon Mountain and the mountain dome in the center to set up an array was too clumsy. Anyone with the slightest bit of array experience would be able to see through it. Furthermore, if it was set up like this, it wouldn't be called a large-scale array at all. Wang Zhen had once heard his parents tell the story of the war between the gods and the domain of the gods. In ancient times, the most outstanding array master in the domain of the gods could set up an array around a small country. In order to revive his country, this crazy array master chose to destroy his own country first, and then came up with the idea of setting up a large-scale array. In order to set up this large-scale array, the crazy array master calculated the position and timing, and dug a tunnel deep underground day and night until he finally completed a perfect circle around the country. Then, he activated the array in an attempt to sacrifice the entire population of the country. This inhumane dark array was the most notorious, country blood sacrifice array, in the Battle of the Gods. Once the array was formed, the souls of all the Almighties at a certain level inside the array would be sacrificed in an instant, and their bodies would turn into dust. But this large-scale array had long been restricted, and both Earth and the domain of the gods were under strict control. Wang Zhen had only heard about it a few times from word of mouth since he was a child. If they're setting up such a large-scale array, Huaxiao Alliance shouldn't be completely unresponsive. Wang Zhen was deeply worried. He was thinking about something. If the layout of this array formation was a little bigger? What if the setup of this giant array was not limited to just one country? What if the other party's goal from the very beginning was to use Earth as the end of the array? Chapter 1176. A terrifying idea formed in Wang Zhen's mind. A super-universe level magic array was something he had never thought of before. It was a little unbelievable, and even more so, it made his hair stand on end. Loopy Toad's fur stood on end. Are you sure the other party has already set up all the points for the array, and Earth is the last one? Wang Zhen's face was solemn. It's not impossible. Earth isn't the only place with heavenly veins. If the 8 planets in the solar system plus the sun itself are moved to a particular angle, the conditions for setting up the array will be just right. Then, as long as the heavenly veins master valve on Earth is open before that particular trajectory arrives, the array will be complete. Of course, these were just Wang Zhen's speculations, and he didn't have any concrete evidence to prove it. Following Loopy Toad's aura, Wang Zhen and the other two were finally approaching the center of the domed mountain peak. The patrols in this area were particularly strict, and no less than 50 to 63-man teams of the resident special forces patrolled the area. Under such a strict security mechanism, it was reasonable to say that if there were any traces of outsiders on the dome, it would definitely not escape the eyes of these resident special forces. They lived here all year round and were very familiar with the terrain here. Each of their eyesight was comparable to the eyes of an eagle. Even in the process of flying on a sword, they could quickly lock on the target at a very high altitude. In addition, they now carried incomparably sophisticated detection magic treasures on them, and it could be said that they had a panoramic view of any movement nearby. But in Wang Zhen's view, this seemingly impenetrable defense actually had a fatal loophole. What if those people have already snuck in a long time ago? Wang Zhen asked. You suspect that they're already inside? That's right. Wang Zhen nodded. Since the person behind the scenes wants to set up such an evil super-universe level array, they must have a lot of patience. From what I know, someone once hid under a bed in a person's house for a whole week to ambush them, in order to find the right opportunity to create an alibi. In order to achieve a certain goal, these top almighties have plenty of time to wait patiently. Makes sense. Loopy Toad and Little Silver couldn't agree more. They had long since experienced the patience of a superior almighty. For example, when it came to buying limited edition crispy noodle snacks, Little Master Ling would line up very patiently. Even if there was a long queue outside the shop and it was very likely that he wouldn't be able to buy a crispy noodle snack in the end, he was still willing to wait patiently in the queue for the limited edition. Loopy Toad and Little Silver had to admit that they had never seen such patience before. Sometimes, patience was the key to success. At this thought, the three of them could not help but sigh. At that moment, as they approached the heart of the mountain dome, a patrol team rushed over to stop Loopy Toad and the others. Up ahead. What are you doing? Although Loopy Toad and the others were also wearing Special Forces uniforms, some of the patrol members were still suspicious because of their unfamiliar faces. We're from the Special Operations Team. Little Silver stepped forward and took the initiative to answer. He handed over his Office of Strategic Deception badge to the captain of this patrol team. This was an ID badge specially custom-made by the Office of Strategic Deception. Before the start of the competition, Huaxiao Alliance had personally disseminated it to friendly troops and explained how to identify the authenticity of the badge. The moment the captain touched the badge, he already knew that it was real. Then, he saw the silver character engraved in the center of the badge, and his eyes immediately widened. My apologies, so it's Spiritual Master Silver. The captain immediately had a reverent expression on his face. Seeing Little Silver's bare feet, he was even more convinced of Little Silver's true identity. This was because he had previously learned that this Spiritual Master Silver of the Office of Strategic Deception liked to go barefoot. It's fine. Little Silver waved his hand and replied, We're on grenade-throwing Senior Immortal's orders to patrol the inside of the mountain dome and check for hidden dangers. Just stick to your posts, you don't need to come with us. Got it. Please be careful. After Little Silver said this, the captain returned the ID badge with both hands and immediately let them through. When they were a little further away, Loopy Toad also had an incredulous expression on its face. When did you become Spiritual Master Silver? It's all because of my peers. And with this identity, it's easier to bribe people on the road. Grenade throwing already anticipated this kind of situation, Little Silver replied. The core of the mountain dome was the heart of Nine Dragon Mountain, and also where the switch for the Heavenly Vein main valve was located. Logically speaking, such an important stronghold would usually have a special monitoring station set up. However, when Wang Zhen went deeper, he realized that there were no modern buildings on the entire mountain dome. It said that for the sake of the ecology, there aren't any modern buildings on Nine Dragon Mountain. The resident special forces have set up tents nearby, including Old Huang, who has always been stationed here, Little Silver said. Including old Huang, who has been stationed here all this time, said Little Silver. Before coming here, he had done his homework based on the intelligence he had obtained from the Office of Strategic Deception. With old Huang's status, he also lives in a tent? Wang Zhen asked. Old Huang is a little better. There's a natural stalactite cave on this mountain dome, and old Huang has always lived in it to guard the heavenly vein main valve. Even when Huaxiao Alliance summoned him, he never left, and only sent a clone to attend meetings. It's said that for a very long time, old Huang's real body never left the cave. Perhaps thousands of years had passed since then. If Huaxiao Alliance hadn't recognized him as chief commander this time, I'm afraid he would still have chosen to stay in the cave, Little Silver said. Stationed in a stalactite cave to guard the heavenly vein for more than 1,000 years, Wang Zhen was instantly vigilant. Where is this cave? He now suspected a creepy possibility. Just as Little Silver was about to lead everyone to the stalactite cave where old Huang had lived, a strong sense of oppression suddenly descended. Enemies are coming, be careful. Wang Zhen was instantly on guard. In front of the stalactite cave, a blindfolded warrior appeared. He wore thick warrior armor, and his entire body exuded a bloody aura of slaughter. This person is, Little Silver felt that this person was a little familiar, and seemed to have seen him on the list of dangerous resurrectees that Huaxiao Alliance had provided. This is Zayamen Rokuro. He's a Sun Island swordsman who uses the 7 killing techniques of ghosts and gods to kill people in 7 steps. Loopy Toad replied. Zayamen Rokuro had been one of the most famous dark network criminals back then, but had been wiped out by the peacekeeping force dispatched by Mishio Nation during a hunter operation. And most importantly, this Zayamen Rokuro seemed to have some connection to that old devil. Chapter 1177. Zayamen Rokuro's 7 kills of ghosts and gods had been famous back then. It was said that no matter what enemy he encountered, he would behead them within 7 steps. Now that they saw him again, the oppressive feeling of killing people like flies was indeed suffocating. If it wasn't for the fact that the average strength of Wang Zhen and the other 2 was above average, even if these members of the resident special forces met Zayamen Rokuro at this moment, their bodies would definitely be bound by the immense pressure, and they wouldn't be able to move at all, as if they had been petrified. Zayamen Rokuro died in a hunter operation back then, but he's still very strong. Everyone, be careful. Little Silver stepped forward on his bare feet. As a holy beast, he had a powerful self-healing ability. Even if his head was severed, he could instantly restore it as long as it was immediately reattached. It was said that Zayamen Rokuro's 7 kills technique was world-shaking, but Little Silver believed that the other party definitely wouldn't be able to kill him. No matter how strong his 7 kills technique was, his self-healing ability wasn't bad. However, when Zayamen Rokuro saw Little Silver step forward barefoot, he subconsciously took a step back. He put his hand on his katana, and although he was blindfolded, his movements were still precise and elegant. I'm afraid it's not fair for you to fight 3 against 1. Unexpectedly, as a dark network criminal originally from Sun Island, Zayamen Rokuro's Mandarin was surprisingly good, and there was even a hint of a capital accent. Don't worry, we'll fight 1-on-1. If I lose, we'll leave right away. Little Silver's expression was very confident. He believed that Zayamen Rokuro wasn't his match. Furthermore, Zayamen Rokuro was already on the verge of death, and shouldn't have appeared in the present world. Welcoming hell was his only way out. No, the 3 of you. It's not fair to begin with. I should be the one to choose my opponent. Zayamen Rokuro's eyes were covered with a red cloth, and his hoarse voice sounded very harsh. Little Silver didn't understand why Zayamen Rokuro refused to challenge him, so he sighed. Then tell me, who will you choose? Zayamen Rokuro lowered his head, and a few drops of cold sweat trickled down his forehead. In fact, his 7 kills technique of ghosts and gods wasn't a sword technique, but an ability to sense and calculate. He was able to measure the combat strength of the other party and calculate how many strikes the other party would have to endure before he could completely kill them. In fact, he was not blind. The reason why he chose to cover his eyes was to improve his perception and avoid being affected by visual disturbances. High-level swordsmen could only rely on their hearing to fight with others. This was because when they closed their eyes and lost their sight, their energy would become more focused, and the accuracy and explosive power of their swords would also improve along with the improvement of their spiritual power. Zaemen Rokuro had used the famous 7 killing arts of ghosts and gods to predict many enemies, and he deliberately chose those who he predicted would be killed within 7 strikes to create a terrifying atmosphere of killing people with 7 strikes. If he couldn't kill the enemy within 7 strikes, Zaemen Rokuro would subconsciously choose to avoid the battle. His reputation was still very important. He had said that he would need 7 sure-kill swords, so he had to have 7 sure-kill swords. Even one more would have a huge impact on his character. Even though Zaemen Rokuro was resurrected by the person behind the scenes after his death, as a dead person, he still paid attention to his character. He had said that he would kill someone in 7 moves, not one more. Thus, when Zaemen Rokuro had received the order from the person behind the scenes to stand guard at the mouth of the stalactite cave, he had been thinking about how to shock the world with his 7 killing arts of ghosts and gods. He had been thinking about a grand plan to revive the country when Little Silver, Wangzhen and Loopy Toad had come knocking on his door. Zaemen Rokuro took a deep breath and stroked his katana. He realized that his opportunity had come. However, when Little Silver stepped forward to fight him, a number instantly flashed through Zaemen Rokuro's mind. +82319239 strikes. Zaemen Rokuro? He actually had to slash out more than 800 million times in a row before he could kill the young man in front of him? Where on earth did this young man come from? More than 800 million strikes was an impossible task. Even if the other party stood motionless in front of him and let him slash at him, he wouldn't be able to finish it in a short time. This was too far from his goal of killing someone with 7 strikes. Zaemen Rokuro even suspected that there might be something wrong with his prediction. So he raised an objection. He asked for someone else to fight him. Then, he turned his gaze to Wangzhen. In the end, the number that flashed through Wangzhen's mind was even longer than Little Silver's. He would need to slash out more than 1 billion times in order to kill Wangzhen. Zaemen Rokuro took a deep breath. He now suspected that there was something seriously wrong with his brain. Logically speaking, he already wasn't weak. At the very least, he was more than a match for these Special Forces members outside. But, the numbers shown in both predictions were extremely abnormal. Zaemen Rokuro couldn't help breaking out in a cold sweat. Then, he pinned his last hope on a young man with a head full of green hair. In the end, Loopy Toad also showed a lot of numbers, although it also showed that it would take more than 700 million strikes to kill Loopy Toad. Zaemen Rokuro was already certain that Loopy Toad was the weakest of the 3. Furthermore, there had to be something wrong with his Ghost God 7 kills technique. Zaemen Rokuro suspected that he had been dead for too long and had forgotten to add a decimal point to the Ghost God 7 kills technique, which was why the numbers in front of him were so frightening. The main thing was that these 3 people looked ordinary and didn't give off the slightest bit of aura. They didn't look like very powerful opponents. Zaemen Rokuro was even more certain that his prediction had been wrong. If it was a problem of the decimal point not being added, then of the 3 people in front of him, only Loopy Toad had 700 million strikes, plus the decimal point, minus the 100 million, it was only 7 strikes. Thus, with this psychological comfort, Zaemen Rokuro heaved a sigh of relief. He swiftly put his hand on his katana and strode forward, nimbly sidestepping to stab at Loopy Toad with his sword. Loopy Toad hadn't expected Zaemen Rokuro to directly choose it as his opponent. But it had long been on guard. With this strike, Zaemen Rokuro moved 3 steps in total, that was to say, if he moved 4 more steps, he would be fatally wounded. All of a sudden, Loopy Toad actually felt a little excited. It seemed that it had been a very long time since it had been injured since it had become a dog. Furthermore, as it gradually got used to the comfortable life on Earth, it felt nostalgic for those years when it had fought with the demon race. Fighting Zaemen Rokuro now made Loopy Toad instantly recall things from a long time ago. In its days, Zaemen Rokuro had already moved to the 7th step. "Brother dog, watch out." As soon as Wang Zhen's voice fell, Zaemen Rokuro's katana ruthlessly chopped down at Loopy Toad's dog head. The next moment, bang! Something broke on the spot, but it wasn't Loopy Toad's head that broke. It was Zaemen Rokuro's katana. Instead, it was Zaemen Rokuro's katana. Chapter 1178. Zaemen Rokuro was extremely confident in this slash. His samurai sword was called Ghost Steel, which was made of abyss-cold iron from the Howling Abyss, and was indestructible. If his 7 kills technique had really misjudged, he could have definitely cut off Loopy Toad's head. But as it turned out, he had made an obvious mistake in his prediction. The power of this slash wasn't of much use to Loopy Toad. It didn't even feel the slightest bit of pain. Its green hair fluttered in the wind as the sword chi cut through the air. This was the first time Zaemen Rokuro had faced this kind of situation. In a situation where their strengths weren't equal, Zaemen Rokuro's chances of winning were slim to none. Now that Wang Zhen and the other two had the power of Shadow Dao, this slash naturally couldn't cause them any harm. Not only that, Zaemen Rokuro had to pay with his Ghost Steel sword. My Ghost Steel. My incomparably sharp sword that can cut through iron like mud, with a sharp head and a hilt that I can give to my girlfriend. Zaemen Rokuro cried his heart out when the Ghost Steel sword was cut in half. The Ghost Steel sword had been with him for many years, and the first thing he had done after his resurrection was to retrieve it. But what Zaemen Rokuro hadn't expected was that before the Ghost Steel sword in his hand had completely warmed up, it had actually been cut in half by his misjudgment. When the sword was broken, the spiritual link with its owner was instantly severed. Zaemen Rokuro instantly felt like his heart was being cut by a knife, and he couldn't help coughing up a mouthful of blood. The pain of the backlash was far worse than he had imagined. It was a kind of pain that stemmed from the soul. When the pain started, you wouldn't even be able to find any wounds. You would only feel the chi and blood in your body churn and you would have a splitting headache. There's no way you can beat my master. After saying that, Zaemen Rokuro stabbed the remaining half of the Ghost Steel sword into his abdomen. After confirming his death, his body fell apart and turned into a puddle of black light particles that drifted away in the wind. Had he actually chosen suicide? Wang Zhen pinched his chin as he pondered what had happened. Logically speaking, a powerful swordsman like Zaemen Rokuro, who was an extremely high-ranking Dark Network wanted swordsman, would never choose suicide because of the pain of the backlash. To be able to reach such a high ranking, his cultivation experience and combat experience were second to none, and he wouldn't choose suicide to lessen the pain. Thus, he immediately thought of another possibility. In an independent mental space, Wang Zhen, Little Silver, and Loopy Toad established a face-to-face telepathy channel. In this completely isolated mental space, no one else could hear their conversation. He faked his death. Wang Zhen quickly came to a conclusion. He didn't use any spells or techniques, nor did he use his eye power. Instead, he relied entirely on his own experience to judge. "Why are you so sure?" asked Loopy Toad. As someone who had once played dead in front of Wang Ling, Loopy Toad was especially sensitive to the term fake death. Pretending to be dead and then taking the opportunity to escape was a profound skill and knowledge. In the cultivation world, faking death together with a variety of spells can be used to play with flowers. Loopy Toad had seen a spell specially developed for faking one's death, and it was called the split into pieces spell. In the process of using this technique, the body could be split into countless pieces of different sizes, and finally be reconnected using a jigsaw puzzle technique. This was a very profound technique for faking one's death. Of course, the proficiency required was also very high. Usually, one would need to practice at home until the corresponding proficiency was reached before they could use it normally. Because if they weren't proficient, they could spell the wrong parts. And once they did, they could only wait until they had accumulated enough spirit energy to cast the spell again. There was once a male cultivator who had turned into a small elephant man because he had misspelled parts of his body. If you wanted to use this spell in battle, if you weren't proficient enough, it was very likely that the enemy would see through it because of the uneven splits, and it was very likely that you would be whipped to destroy the integrity of the pieces. I know of a curse-type faking death spell, which can be achieved by harming yourself. These people use the method of suicide to add their remaining soul power to a specific person. And this specific person must be a blood relative. Loopy Toad, that's to say, Xamen Rokuro has brothers? Little Silver nodded. According to intelligence, Xamen Rokuro does indeed have brothers, and all three of them are very strong sword cultivators. Unfortunately, Xamen Rokuro's halo was too big back then, which caused the other two brothers to be buried. There's such a thing? He has two brothers? One is called Xamen Rokuro, the other is Xamen Rokuro. It could only be said that Wang Zhen was in the end Wang Zhen. As someone from the domain of the gods, he could tell at a glance that this was a faking death spell. Sure enough, before they could step into the stalactite, a middle-aged man who looked exactly like Xamen Rokuro walked out of the cave, wearing the same attire as Xamen Rokuro. The only difference was that the sword in his hand was clearly different from the dark steel sword that Xamen Rokuro had taken out. Although there wasn't much difference in appearance, it was clear that Xamen Rokuro's sword had an evil power attached to it. It seems that the brothers have imbued the spirit's sword with the power of the curse. Wang Zhen took a deep breath. Since he had already confirmed that Xamen Rokuro had two other brothers, it was likely that this situation had been planned in advance. Whether it was Xamen Rokuro or Xamen Rokuro in front of him, they weren't afraid of being angry. Instead, after they died, they could better imbue their other brothers with the power of their souls. So to deal with these three brothers, using normal means to kill them would instead make them stronger. I'll do it. This time, Wang Zhen decided to do it himself. On one hand, he wanted to see how strong his power of Shadow Dao was. Right now, he still lacked a certain amount of practical experience, and the three Xamen brothers were undoubtedly the best targets for practice. Tide Man. In the next moment, Wang Zhen stepped forward and called out the name of his Shadow Dao shadow image. When his shadow was activated from the ground, the muscular man, who was tied up with ropes, rose from the ground like a towering mountain. Xamen Rokuro's heart trembled. He didn't have the power of Shadow Dao, and didn't know what was happening in front of him. In the next moment, Xamen Rokuro felt his whole body tighten as an inexplicable force actually bound him. This force was like a rope wrapped around him in layers. This was the love is stronger than gold rope. As long as Wang Zhen's shadow image was within its attack range, it was a powerful control spell. You three brothers, where's the third person? At that moment, Wang Zhen stared at Xamen Rokuro. He could actually use the power of shadow image better than he had imagined. As expected of Ling Zhenren's little sister's power, these brother and sister were both geniuses. Chapter 1179. It was Monday, November 17th, the third day of the National Cultivation School Body Technique Competition. At dawn on Fire Peak, when the first rays of the sun shone on Wang Ling's face, it perfectly outlined the contours of his handsome profile. Although Wang Ling had already tried his best to reshape his face so that his looks were average, a person's temperament wouldn't change because of this. Wang Ling turned his gaze to Round Peak as he observed the movements of Wang Zhen, Little Silver, and Loopy Toad's three-person team. Judging from their battle strength, Wang Ling felt that with Shadow Dao activated, the three of them wouldn't be at a disadvantage. But Wang Ling had a bad feeling about this. A large part of the reason why he had chosen to have Wang Zhen act on his behalf to draw out the person behind the scenes was because he couldn't sense his aura. This was something that had never happened before. Wang Ling didn't think that there was anything wrong with him, as he still had terrifying and uncontrollable power. However, this unknown person behind the scenes had a strange origin that Wang Ling had never heard of before. But for Wang Ling, this wasn't the only trouble in front of him. Early in the morning, Wang Ling stood on the cliff and observed Wang Zhen's movements. This action immediately sparked a discussion among number 60 High's Wang Ling concern group and his fan club. What's Wang Ling thinking? He looks uneasy. As a good brother, Hero Guo was actually very concerned about Wang Ling's movements. To be honest, this was the first time he had seen Wang Ling so anxious. This guy is usually very calm during exams. I've never seen him look like this before. Super Chen thought of how Wang Ling had always been calm and composed when he did the questions and got an average score in the past. Whether it was the big and small tests or the monthly exam, Wang Ling's expression had never changed. Even though they had been through so many activities, Wang Ling was still the calmest of them all. Maybe he's feeling anxious because the competition is too long. Hero Guo rubbed his chin, feeling that he didn't quite understand what was going on. It's possible. Super Chen nodded. It's not like he's worried about saving the world. It's not that easy to be a hero these days. Wang Ling, as an expressionless man who almost never showed anxiety on his face, Wang Ling never thought that his anxiety would be so obvious. Because he was used to facial paralysis, even if a slight expression occasionally appeared on his face, it would still be a stark contrast in the eyes of outsiders. What should he do when the mascot becomes anxious? What Wang Ling faced next was naturally the group of people sending him warmth. The first to arrive were Super Chen and Hero Guo. These two good brothers each put their arms around Wang Ling's shoulders. Hero Guo, Wang Ling, I think you shouldn't work today, and just rest well in the tent. I think there's something wrong with your mental state. There are still a few days left. You're our mascot, so you can't collapse. Super Chen nodded in agreement with Hero Guo's view. How about this, Wang Ling? You're part of the talisman maker team to begin with, so I'll draw the talismans for you today and tomorrow. Don't worry about anything else, just lie down. Also, do you need a massage? The martial arts massage technique I learned from my father is pretty good. It can relax both the mind and the muscles. Wang Ling was caught off guard by the sudden enthusiasm, and felt that he had underestimated the power of Xia Ming's fan club. Xia Ming had previously viewed Wang Ling as a love rival, but after being taken in by Wang Ling's charisma, he had instantly become the president of the fan club. As the president, Xia Ming naturally came to personally express his concern for Wang Ling. Student Wang Ling, are you feeling unwell? I've already asked student Lotus Sun to refine a Dahuan pill with the pill-making machine. It said that it can nourish the yin and kidney, and can regulate your breathing. You can eat one and stay up all night. The most important thing is that it can also strengthen your body and improve your immune system, and effectively kill that troublesome coronavirus. After Xia Ming's concern was over, the girls in number 60 High's camp weren't idle either. Li Yuyue was preparing a luxurious, nutritious breakfast. This food was made from local ingredients, mostly spirit fruits and spirit plants. Li Yuyue used her exquisite cooking skills to make fruit soup and vegetable rolls, which were both nutritious and hygienic. Of course, there were also a few boys who suggested eating meat. However, eating wild game was actually not recommended nowadays. In addition, many of the spirit beasts on Nine Dragon Mountain were protective spirit beasts. Otherwise, it was not recommended to kill just to satisfy one's appetite. After all, there were plenty of things that could be used to supplement nutrition. In response to the boys' suggestion of eating meat, Li Yuyue also tried to use her own methods to send people to gather some spirit beans. Relying on bean products to make artificial meat, it could just barely be considered a meat dish that wasn't meat. Of course. In order to show concern for Wang Ling, Li Yuyue especially used spirit beans to make crispy noodle snacks. They were fried on the spot and fresh from the oven. They could be eaten directly after being crushed and seasoned. These seasonings were naturally gathered, and could be used after being ground into powder and mixed. Wang Ling never thought that Li Yuyue would actually be so dexterous that she could even make crispy noodle snacks in the wild. For a moment, Wang Ling actually felt his anxiety ease a lot, until the next moment, Lotus Sun found him. Student Wang Ling, they said that your mental state isn't very stable. Are you sick? Lotus Sun stepped forward and touched Wang Ling's forehead to confirm that he didn't have a fever. The flu had been prevalent these days, and it would definitely be troublesome if he really did fall ill with a fever in the wild. Fortunately, however, she was about to refine the Dahuan pill. It wasn't too difficult to use the pill-making machine that her family had specially built. Student Lotus Sun, did you see anything? At that moment, Lu Qingyi stepped forward and asked. She actually knew that Wang Ling was completely fine. This was Ling Jinren. How could there be a problem? But the reason why Lu Qingyi had chosen to make a move at that moment was actually to return Lotus Sun's favor from last night, so she decided to come out and assist. Tell me. Is it because the boys' tents are too messy? Our girls' tents have so many of them. Maybe someone infected Wang Ling. I think Nan Ishio coughed a lot last night. Cough, the corners of Wang Ling's mouth twitched. Nan Ishio hadn't coughed a lot. That was because he had been a lookout for some boys who had been peeking at the girls, but it was said that because it was too dark, they hadn't seen anything. Wang Ling had thought that Lu Qingyi had come out to save him, but in the end, he was stunned to realize that the other party had completely sold him out. When Lotus Sun heard Lu Qingyi's words, she actually felt that they made a lot of sense. She looked at Wang Ling and asked with a flushed face, "Student Wang Ling, do you want to sleep with us tonight?" With us tonight. At that moment, Wang Ling's mind was completely blank. In the face of everyone's sincere concern, Wang Ling absent-mindedly realized, perhaps, this was the real crisis. And so, instead of easing his anxiety, Wang Ling felt that he was even more anxious. Sleep together? Lu Qingyi shrieked in alarm. She had just assisted, but hadn't expected Lotus Sun to actually be so bold. Lotus Sun's face was completely red as she stamped her foot anxiously. What? I just wanted to say, do you want to switch tents with us? Chapter 1180. Everyone's concern made Wang Ling feel uncomfortable, and the strength of Xia Ming's fan club was also beyond his expectations. Wang Ling never thought that he would really become everyone's favorite mascot, and one that looked very weak and needed to be protected at all times. As the leader of Wang Ling's fan club, student Xia Ming took on the responsibility of interviewing everyone as to why Wang Ling had become so popular in such a short period of time. Why do you think classmate Wang Ling needs protection? Xia Ming randomly conducted interviews in the camp. The data from this interview would allow him to better fulfill his role as leader. Nan Ishio, who was the first to be questioned, had a surprised expression on his face. If the mascot doesn't need to be protected like a vase, don't tell me you want the mascot to be the vanguard? Nan Ishio had only decided to join the fan club after Wang Ling had brought Wang Jun back. As far as he knew, Wang Ling was the weakest person in the whole of number 60 high school, which was why he was the school mascot. But after Wang Jun went missing, this weakest mascot had actually gone out to look for him and even brought him back. This made Nan Ishio, the captain of South Sea Sky High, feel too ashamed to show his face. After careful consideration, Nan Ishio excitedly grabbed Xia Ming's hand and said, "As a mascot, classmate Wang Ling is really very courageous." Courageous. Xia Ming really agreed with this point. When he and Wang Ling had been at loggerheads back then, he had challenged Wang Ling in front of so many people for Lotus Sun. In the end, not only had Wang Ling not backed down, he had even taken the initiative to accept the challenge after school. He was indeed a very courageous person. Apart from Nan Ishio, the others also gave their own answers to the question of why Wang Ling needed protection. Xia Ming, as Wang Ling's closest classmates, why did you join the fan club? Super Chen, Wang Ling. The main reason I joined the fan club was because you promised to copy my homework every day after school started. Xia Ming, can you not be so honest? Super Chen sighed helplessly. I had no choice. When I copied Wang Ling's homework before, he always got half of it wrong. What could I do? Out of 10 questions, he got 4 wrong, and passed every time with a passing score. I don't know how Wang Ling did it. On the side, Hirogwa had a deep understanding of Super Chen's reply. Whether it was exams or homework, Wang Ling was amazing. For example, Hirogwa really couldn't figure out why Wang Ling was able to push the lines so accurately every time he took an exam. This was not something an ordinary person could do. So, you joined the fan club just to copy homework? Xia Ming felt that this kind of opportunistic behavior was shameless. What followed was what the girls thought of Wang Ling, which was what Xia Ming was most concerned about. Classmate Lotus Sun, why do you think classmate Wang Ling inspires such a strong desire to protect others? Among the girls, the first person Xia Ming asked was Lotus Sunday. As his and Wang Ling's mutual target back then, Xia Ming was very concerned about her true thoughts. Faced with the interview, Lotus Sun's expression was especially relaxed. I just think classmate Wang Ling is very cute. Xia Ming instantly felt like he had been dealt a critical blow. Cute, was that a word used to describe a man? Xia Ming suddenly felt a little sour. This wasn't just an era of scientific cultivation, but also an era of rampant lemon people. Their army of lemon people would use all kinds of bottom-line methods to attack you and make all kinds of sarcasm. Xia Ming really wanted to ask, wasn't he cute? But in the face of certain defeat, Xia Ming felt that he didn't have the slightest chance of winning, because even from a boy's point of view, he had to admit that Wang Ling was indeed a little interesting. But as a boy with a normal orientation, Xia Ming didn't have any superfluous thoughts about Wang Ling. He now only had admiration for him. Classmate Wang Ling is certainly cute, but is everyone so protective of him just because he's cute? As the leader of the fan club, Xia Ming hoped to dig deeper. Compared with Wang Ling's cuteness, he actually admired Wang Ling's charisma more. Lotus Sun, isn't being cute enough? There are so few cute boys nowadays. Look at classmate Wang Ling's dead fish eyes, they're round and cute. And look at your double eyelids. Every time I see them, I think you're still sleepy. Xia Ming? At that moment, Li Yuyue on the side also chimed in. Also, have you noticed that classmate Wang Ling is especially keen on crispy noodle snacks? Based on our family's many years of experience with food, being keen on one kind of snack means that he's more single-minded, and is usually the ideal boyfriend type. Furthermore, you can draw cards in a snack like crispy noodle snacks. If a man is so interested in the lottery, it means that he's saving money. Also, crispy noodle snacks lottery is mostly for collecting cards, which symbolizes a kind of persistent spirit. If he wins the lottery, it also means that he's lucky. When all was said and done, Li Yuyue and Lotus Sun high-fived each other and said almost in unison, nowadays, who doesn't want to have a cute, single-minded, persistent and lucky boyfriend? At this point in the interview, Xia Ming felt like he had suffered a 10,000-ton blow, F***K. He couldn't do this interview anymore. On the other side, Wang Zhen and the others had already entered the stalactite cave without a hitch. Wang Zhen's binding man tied up Chimen Qilang tightly because Chimen Qilang was already under control. Their third brother, Chimen Qilang, wasn't affected by the power of the curse. I will never betray my brother. Even if you torture me, I won't say a word. Because of Wang Zhen's shadow-binding man, the possibility of Chimen Qilang committing suicide to perpetuate the curse was eliminated. Chimen Qilang wasn't afraid of death, because he was well aware that his death would make his third brother stronger. It doesn't matter if you don't want to say it, we weren't aiming at you in the first place. Wang Zhen smiled. He had already seen who knew how many times in the domain of the gods, and Chimen Qilang's method was completely inadequate. The combined strength of these three brothers was just an appetizer. Wang Zhen was looking forward to a real battle. As a fighting race from the domain of the gods, if a battle couldn't threaten their lives at all, then, what was the point? Chapter 1181. The red stalactite cave that Old Huang guarded was divided into 5 areas. After getting rid of the Menshur brothers, Wang Zhen, Little Silver, and Loopy Toad entered the inner stalactite cave without a hitch. The cave was very humid, and water constantly dripped down from the stone pillars above. The water droplets exploded on Loopy Toad's head of green hair, and icy cold air seeped into its body, making its hair stand on end. This stalactite cave had been around for thousands of years. Stalactites were everywhere inside, and they exuded an immortal aura. Some hung upside down like jade dragon teeth from the top to the ground, while others hung in the air like clouds and rain, creating surging white waves that couldn't help marveling at them. Although this place was beautiful, it couldn't be lived in for long. The cold air of a 1,000-year-old stalactite cave would fill a person with yin qi. Unless they used an extreme yang technique to help them, they would definitely get all kinds of rheumatic diseases in the long run. I saw old Huang from afar before, and he definitely doesn't cultivate an extreme yang technique. Deep in the stalactite cave, Wang Zhen's suspicions about old Huang deepened. Wang Zhen had once been fortunate enough to see a so-called extreme yang technique that could channel the power of the sun into the body in the form of qigong, and finally perfectly fuse the sun with spirit qi for free manipulation. When the cultivation method was activated, it combined the power of the sun, spiritual energy, and blood energy. The three different kinds of energy would be tightly entwined together like a fried dough twist. When the last punch broke out, the fist would emit a dazzling light like the sun. This technique was called sun wave, and Wang Zhen had only seen it once in his lifetime. The boxing master who had comprehended this technique was in the domain of the gods. His name was Apollo, and he was a fair, strong man who was pitch black all over and liked to smear olive oil all over his body. After cultivating sun wave, his entire body shone with golden light, and he exuded a golden aura. But there was currently no war in the domain of the gods. Although Apollo was indeed very strong after cultivating sun wave, he had now become a traffic policeman on night duty in the domain of the gods, responsible for maintaining order in the domain of the gods at night. Are there no more high-end jobs in the domain of the gods? Yes. Apollo also works part-time as a rechargeable battery holder. I'll introduce you to him when I get the chance. Back to the main topic, Wang Zhen's question was about old Huang's true identity. It was unrealistic to live in such a place of extreme yin for a long time without an extreme yang cultivation technique. Little Silver and Loopy Toad both had incredulous expressions on their faces when they heard this news in the chat channel. Are you saying that the elder Huang in the command center is fake? It's just a guess because I don't have any concrete evidence. Since the other party was able to put on such a perfect disguise and even deceive President Qi, one of the 10 generals, he definitely has his own unique methods. Wang Zhen felt that the situation behind the scenes wasn't that simple. There had to be some secret that few people knew about. He knew that old Huang was President Qi's Shifu. Master and disciple knew each other very well. If this was a fake old Huang, given President Qi's abilities, there was no way he wouldn't have sensed it. The deeper Wang Zhen investigated this matter, the more he felt that there was something strange and sinister about the whole thing. A mysterious person behind the scenes who had yet to show his face, and a fake old Huang whom even President Qi, his own disciple, couldn't verify. How many more tricks did he have up his sleeves? After probing the entire stalactite cave with his perception ability, Wang Zhen abruptly felt a huge shock to his mind. In the 4th and 5th sections of the stalactite cave, he could clearly sense that his perception was blocked by a mysterious and unfathomable force. His spiritual sea instantly fell into a pitch-black darkness, and for a moment, he couldn't see anything. I never thought you would actually be able to make it here. I told you that the 3 brothers were trash, but my lord didn't believe me. A familiar voice rang out in the darkness. It was a feminine woman's voice, and there was a hint of ruthlessness in it. Loopy Toad controlled its dog fur, and its green hair burst forth with a brilliant green light that instantly illuminated the area in front of it. This was a new ability it had obtained after evolving into a human form. It could turn up the brightness of its fluorescent dog fur in its dog form and project it this way. Little Silver was very shocked by this new ability, because it was his first time seeing it. Since when did a super champion have green hair? Loopy Toad, after I evolved into a human form, I've been gradually developing my new abilities, and there are still a lot of things you don't know. So don't be too surprised, these are all basic abilities. Little Silver and Wang Zhen. Under the illumination of Loopy Toad's green light, everyone could finally clearly see the appearance of the person in the darkness. It was a well-proportioned woman with long, elegant hair, slender eyes and a straight nose. She wore a black and red corset and had thick makeup on her face. When Loopy Toad saw this person for the first time, it felt that she looked a little familiar. But when its gaze shifted to the woman's chest, it couldn't take its eyes off her. This is 36D. The reason why it was so familiar with this size wasn't because Loopy Toad had started to develop an interest in human women. The main reason was that it had an indissoluble bond with this 36D, shadow stream. Loopy Toad stared at the woman in front of it and made its own guess. At the same time, its eyes were extremely vigilant. The master of Shadow Stream had probably already been captured and was being held on high alert by Warden Liang in Songhai First Prison. Logically speaking, it was impossible for her to appear here. Furthermore, this pair of Shadow Stream sisters had a criminal record of breaking out of prison, so Liang Yuzhang had already raised their level of imprisonment to the highest level for crimes. It was second only to the Mahjong trio. That's right, I'm Shadow Stream. But what surprised Loopy Toad was that the woman in front of it actually admitted her identity very quickly. She grinned sinisterly. After I woke up, I knew that Shadow Stream had already disappeared. As expected, those two sisters were good-for-nothings. The foundation I left behind was smashed to smithereens. Shadow Stream was supposed to be the most powerful killer organization in the world. Who would have thought that in the end, it would be defeated by my two disciples? Jiang Luiying, Jiang Luiyue, they're both your disciples? Loopy Toad suddenly understood, and felt that all the clues had instantly become clear. Does all this still matter? The woman smiled. The shadow stream of the past no longer exists. Now, it's a brand new beginning. She took a step forward and then took out a sharp dagger from the side of her slender thigh. I'm not the master of Shadow Stream, but the ancestor of Shadow Stream. The legendary third epic level killer on the list of killers. Chapter 1182. The legendary third epic level killer, the founder of Shadow Stream, Jiang Yingyu. Another nickname in the world of killers, Shadow Stream Progenitor. In terms of battle strength, Jiang Yingyu had been neck and neck with gorgeous itinerant and Daoist Tao Tai at her peak. But the three of them hadn't had the same shifu. It was just that Loopy Toad hadn't expected Shadow Stream Progenitor Jiang Yingyu, who was said to have retired from the world of martial arts, to actually be dead. If she hadn't come back to life this time, Jiang Yingyu's disappearance would probably still be an unsolved mystery in the world of killers. But Loopy Toad was deeply curious about how Jiang Luiyue had died. Wang Zhen and Little Silver weren't interested in Jiang Luiyue's identity, but Loopy Toad and Shadow Stream could be considered ill-fated. Naturally, I failed in my challenge against Numinous Mother. Jiang Yingyu said lightly, as if losing to Numinous Mother was nothing out of the ordinary. You've met Numinous Mother? Loopy Toad was blank. Of course I've met her, and we even fought. Although I lost miserably, I died in the end from my injuries. But my fight with her that time, it's still vivid in my mind. Jiang Yinyu said, now that I have a chance to start over, if I see her again, I'll definitely take away her title as the progenitor of the world of killers with my own hands. Not only have you seen her, but you've also fought her. Loopy Toad was even more astonished, because it was one of the few people who knew Numinous Mother's true identity. Mother Wang was a housewife through and through. If she had run into a lunatic like Jiang Yinyu on the road, how could she have fought back? Loopy Toad felt that there was something fishy about this. Although Mother Wang was the genuine Numinous Mother, her identity had been formed by all kinds of freak accidents and coincidences. In fact, over the years, even Mother Wang herself had almost forgotten that she had once used the pen name, Numinous Mother. She didn't even know that she had trained two members with the help of a lost outline. Epic level killer, I've also met Numinous Mother. At that moment, Loopy Toad raised its head. It was very patient and wasn't in a hurry to make a move, it just wanted to test whether the person Jiang Yingyue had seen was Mother Wang. She's the most special woman I've ever met. She's elegant, intellectual, and loves life. She's definitely the model of a good wife and mother. Jiang Yinyu didn't feel the slightest bit regretful about losing to the Numinous Mother. Sometimes, when one's skills were inferior to others, there was nothing to complain about. Loopy Toad listened to Jiang Yinyue's adjectives, and at first glance, it felt that they were indeed describing Mother Wang. When she had still been using the pen name, Numinous Mother, Mother Wang had indeed been an intellectual and elegant female writer. After giving birth to Wang Ling, she had stopped writing and become a virtuous wife and loving mother, As Loopy Toad listened to Jiang Yinyue's description, it felt its impression of Mother Wang start to blur. Was Nurse Wang really a big shot? For a moment, Loopy Toad felt like its entire being was a mess. It had lived in the Wang family's small villa for so many days, and had never noticed anything unusual about Mother Wang. She really was just a well-behaved housewife. But looking at Jiang Yinyue's situation, there were indeed signs that the two of them had fought before. Jiang Yinyue looked Loopy Toad up and down. The first thing she had done after her resurrection had been to find out about Shadow Stream's development in recent years. In the end, she had learned from the news that Shadow Stream's attack on number 60 High had failed, and the entire organization had been wiped out. In the span of a month, the organization she had painstakingly planned had fallen apart in an instant. Jiang Yinyue's heart instantly broke down. After investigating, Jiang Yinyue realized that the key reason for Shadow Stream's failure was that it had been too indecisive, as well as a lack of combat experience. Thus, Jiang Yinyue had specially formulated a new plan. It was called. She had meticulously drawn up a grand blueprint for Shadow Stream's future development, and had sorted out the targets for revenge. And Loopy Toad was impressively on Jiang Yinyue's list of revenge targets. I remember there was a green-furred dog in my revenge plan. At that moment, Jiang Yinyue turned her gaze to Loopy Toad. Her slender eyes narrowed into slits, and there was a hint of craftiness in them. It could only be said that the progenitor of Shadow Stream was in the end the progenitor of Shadow Stream. Even though Loopy Toad had already successfully cultivated a human form, she could still tell at a glance that its true form was in fact a green-furred Akita. There were a lot of Akitas who had awakened spiritual intelligence these days, but how many of them were green-furred? Jiang Yinyue was almost instantly able to discern Loopy Toad's true identity. She didn't use any eye power or magic treasure to identify it, but purely relied on her combat experience as the progenitor of Shadow Stream. She wasn't weaker than gorgeous itinerant or Daoist Tao Tai to begin with. But Jiang Yinyue still felt that Loopy Toad's appearance was a little inconceivable. I didn't find you. You actually saw Numinous Mother, and you actually survived? Before our duel, Numinous Mother signed a life and death contract with me. If we unfortunately died during the fight, no one was allowed to make trouble for the other. She told me that anyone who had seen her true form would definitely die. After saying this, Jiang Yinyue looked at Loopy Toad with an even stranger expression. You actually saw Numinous Mother and survived? Loopy Toad? He wasn't. He hadn't. During the time he had been living in the Wang family's small villa, he and Mother Wang had been seeing each other every day. Mother Wang hadn't said that she would kill him just because he had seen her true form. At that moment, Loopy Toad truly felt that there might be some kind of deep misunderstanding here. It was clear that this kind of misunderstanding couldn't be cleared up in a short time. Jiang Yinyue had lost to Numinous Mother back then, and after her resurrection, her greatest hope had been to sum up her experience from her previous defeat and fight Numinous Mother again. But now, in Jiang Yinyue's view, this wish could no longer be fully realized. The Numinous Mother said that anyone who saw her must die. This dog had seen the Numinous Mother, yet survived. Did that mean that? Did that mean that this green-furred dog had killed Numinous Mother? After sorting out her thoughts, Jiang Yinyue stared at Loopy Toad again, and at the same time, there was a gloomy look on her face. You killed Numinous Mother? Loopy Toad, ? Jiang Yinyue, since you killed Numinous Mother, that means that you're stronger than her. As long as this Venerable One kills you, this Venerable One will be able to prove that this Venerable One is the ancestor of the world's #1 assassins. I think there might be some misunderstanding here. Loopy Toad hurriedly tried to dissuade her. It wasn't that it was afraid, it just felt that things weren't completely clear yet. But how could Jiang Yinyue be willing to give it the chance? In the next moment, the woman in front of it formed a magic seal with her hands, and her entire body split into dozens of shadows which surrounded Loopy Toad. Multiple clone technique. Loopy Toad's eyes suddenly turned vigilant. This woman wasn't joking, she was serious. Chapter 1183. The multiple clones spell instantly isolated the battlefield, separating Little Silver and Wang Zhen. In an instant, smoke filled the air. Jiang Yingyu was more cunning than expected. This wasn't a simple clone spell, but a self-destruction clone spell. Once the clones were subjected to external force, they would immediately explode. The explosion of one shadow clone was equivalent to 10 C4 bombs. If so many shadow clones exploded at the same time, anyone under the soul formation stage would definitely be seriously injured if they didn't have enough protection at such a close range. The range of such a bomb was very wide. The entire stalactite cave would be razed to the ground, and everything within 5 kilometers would be affected. Although Wang Zhen and Little Silver didn't think that such a bomb would be fatal to them, it would definitely have a huge impact on the ecology of Nine Dragon Mountain once it exploded. And most importantly, this stalactite cave was very close to the heavenly valve. The consequences of the explosion were unimaginable. With the heavenly valve nearby, Wang Zhen thought that the other party wouldn't be so serious, but it turned out that Jiang Yingyu's madness wasn't any less than that of the 3 Menshur brothers at the entrance. She didn't care about the heavenly valve at all, and instead focused all her attention on the battle in front of her. The main purpose of the person behind the scenes resurrecting so many people was to stall for time. Thus, in Wang Zhen's eyes, the outcome of this battle was meaningless. However, this was an unavoidable battle. If they couldn't get rid of Jiang Yingyu, they wouldn't be able to advance any further. As the third killer on the epic level killer list, Jiang Yingyu was most familiar with the ability, Explosion. The so-called explosion was an art, and the lethality of a close-range explosion was self-evident. As an expert in explosion techniques, Jiang Yingyu was especially confident in her abilities. Especially after she successfully activated the Shadow Dao, she had the ability to plant bombs through her shadow. Heavenly Shadow Explosion Maiden. This was the name of her shadow image. The person who resurrected me gave me great power. My shadow image can plant bombs in any shadow it touches. What do you think your chances of winning against me are? Jiang Yingyu smiled slyly. She was confident that she wouldn't be unable to take care of a green-furred dog with her current strength. The power of her shadow image gave her a lot of confidence. This was a power that Jiang Yingyu had never seen before, but it could multiply her comprehensive strength in a short period of time. If she had this ability back then, and Numinous Mother encountered her, the result would be 100% that she would be blown to death by her. But now, the Numinous Mother had already been killed by this green-furred dog in front of her. So, as long as she killed this dog, she could still prove her position as the ancestor of the assassin world. Thinking of this, Jiang Yingyu's eyes gradually became excited. Her shadow image was that of a scholarly young girl wearing a dazzling purple Lolita dress. At the same time, she was holding an umbrella with a time scale on it. This was the true form of the Shadow Explosion Goddess. As long as one was covered by the umbrella in her hand, the shadow would immediately become a time bomb. This was a very tricky shadow image ability, at least in Loopy Toad's view. It was far more powerful than the 3 Menshur brothers guarding the door. With my Shadow Explosion Goddess here, you have no chance of winning at all. Jiang Yingyue raised her hand and started to manipulate Shadow Explosion Goddess to capture Loopy Toad's shadow image. Loopy Toad's figure could only jump around as they clashed, and for a moment, it seemed like Jiang Yingyue had complete control of the situation. No. I have to think of something. If this goes on, Loopy Toad's shadow will be captured sooner or later. Little Silver wasn't optimistic about the current situation. The Shadow Explosion Goddess moved far faster than he could imagine. Once Loopy Toad was caught, death was just a countdown. Loopy Toad hadn't truly become a holy beast yet. Its self-healing ability was far weaker than a holy beast's. Once it was blown to pieces, unless Ling Zhenren personally took action, there was absolutely no way it could be restored. Wait a little longer. Compared with Little Silver, Wang Zhen was a lot calmer. He had seen too many battles like this. Until the last moment, the outcome of any battle couldn't be determined. Loopy Toad looked like it was at a disadvantage, but Wang Zhen could in fact see that it was looking for the right way to deal with the situation. Do you think you still have a chance of winning? I don't even care about the numinous mother from back then, let alone a mere green-furred dog like you. Jiang Yinyue's smile was extremely confident as she manipulated her shadow image to attack Loopy Toad without the slightest scruple. Although Loopy Toad was constantly dodging, in Jiang Yinyue's view, this was just a trick. Because these 1,000-year-old stalactites in the cave had absorbed natural spirit energy, the environment here had a natural fluorescent effect, and any living creature that set foot here would inevitably have a shadow cast on them. In other words, this was what Jiang Yinyue thought was the best place to attack. As long as she could project a shadow, she would always have an advantage. Numinous mother, you can't touch her, Loopy Toad said earnestly to Jiang Yinyue. Mother Wang's status in the Wang family was unimaginably high. If Jiang Yinyue really was blind enough to dare lay a hand on her, forget about Father Wang, even Wang Ling would personally go to battle and skin Jiang Yinyue alive. So from the very beginning, Loopy Toad had felt that something was fishy. It felt that the numinous mother Jiang Yinyue had encountered might not be Mother Wang herself. Nowadays, there were plenty of swindlers who pretended to be popular celebrities, and the chances of encountering a swindler were very high. Taking 10,000 steps back, if the person they had encountered had really been Mother Wang, and she had in fact been preserving her strength as the numinous mother, Loopy Toad felt that it was impossible for its little master Wang Ling not to have sensed it at all. So to sum up, the chances of Jiang Yinyue running into the fake Mother Wang back then were higher. But it was clear now that no matter what explanation Loopy Toad gave, Jiang Yinyue wouldn't listen. She was eager for revenge, and had been looking forward to a second battle with the numinous mother since her resurrection. When she had mistakenly thought that the legendary ancestor of the world of killers, numinous mother, had died at her hands, the impulse that she had been suppressing for a long time had finally erupted, and she had vented it all on Loopy Toad in one fell swoop. If you're going to persist in going about things the wrong way, then I'll have to use my tricks. Loopy Toad sighed. It hadn't wanted to reveal its shadow image ability in advance before they met the person behind the scenes, but it now looked like Jiang Yinyue's shadow image was indeed too troublesome. The ability to plant a bomb on a shadow the moment it touched it was truly heaven-defying. Helpless, Loopy Toad could only choose to send out its shadow image for a duel. His shadow image was called Godly Fortress. It was an ability that could instantly form a defensive rampart and turn its shadow into a castle. A mere bomb. It was an indestructible castle. Loopy Toad was absolutely confident that it could win this round. As Wang Ling's dog, it absolutely couldn't lose face. Chapter 1184. The huge shadow image was in the shape of a steel toad. Its entire body was made of copper and iron, and Loopy Toad could control its size. Because it had been fighting in the stalactite cave, Loopy Toad had already shrunk the size of the fortress as much as possible, but it still looked stunning. This was a mobile fortress that was indestructible and had fierce firepower. There were no less than dozens of cannons of different calibers set up on its back alone. These cannons were energy storage, and required a certain amount of spirit energy in the body in order to store up cannonballs. The main reason Loopy Toad hadn't summoned its shadow image before was because it wanted to store spirit power. It had been storing spirit power for its shadow image all this time, and now it was finally putting it to use. The moment the Toad Fortress appeared, it instantly released a dazzling light that dispersed all the shadows nearby. All of this was within Loopy Toad's calculations. Jiang Yinyue's shadow image ability was shadow bombs, which could be implanted by touching shadows. While this ability was tricky, if Loopy Toad could freely control the fortress's lighting, it would be able to precisely control its shadow so that it remained at its feet instead of projecting it as a long strip. You can try and see if my fortress's spirit power cannons are faster or if your shadow bombs can reach me first. At that moment, Loopy Toad was maintaining a very long distance from Jiang Yinyue. Its shadow image's advantage was its defense and range. Even if Jiang Yinyue wanted to blow herself up here with a doppelganger spell, Loopy Toad could instantly swallow Wang Zhen and Little Silver into its impregnable fortress. The bombs might be fierce, but they were still within the range of its fortress's defenses. Even if Loopy Toad was injured, as long as Little Silver gave it a few drops of holy beast blood, it would be instantly healed. You want to use cannons on me in this terrain? I'm afraid that won't be good for you. Jiang Yingyue frowned slightly. The green-furred dog in front of her was more difficult to deal with than she had imagined. What surprised Jiang Yingyue even more was that Loopy Toad actually also possessed the power of Shadow Dao. The situation was becoming more and more interesting to Jiang Yingyue. I can use as many as 30 types of cannonballs, and naturally I have cannonballs specially designed for narrow terrain like this. Loopy Toad didn't want to explain too much. In its view, the outcome of this battle was already decided. His annihilation bomb had the ability to automatically track. When it touched an object that needed to be destroyed, it wouldn't cause a big explosion. Instead, it would produce a strong acid that could instantly melt a person into a pool of acid. But to be honest, Loopy Toad didn't want to kill Jiang Yingyue straight away. In Loopy Toad's view, Mother Wang's mystery hadn't been completely solved. If it killed Jiang Yingyue here, this matter would probably become an unsolved mystery in the future. Now, the most probable guess was that someone was using the identity of numinous Mother Wang Ma to swindle people everywhere, and Jiang Yingyue was one of the victims among the countless killers who had been deceived. Looks like you still haven't made up your mind to kill me. That is a taboo in battle. At this moment, Jiang Yingyue laughed evilly. She grinned, revealing her snow-white teeth. Her somewhat morbid face had a tinge of redness. The next moment, she moved swiftly. Loopy Toad would never be able to forget this scene, which was the desperate stance of someone who had given up everything. As the legendary third epic-level killer on the ranking list of killers, Jiang Yingyue's ability to seize opportunities was far superior to that of the twin sisters from Shadow Stream. She was fierce and decisive, without the slightest hesitation. Wind and Thunder 9 kills. She threw the dagger in her hand, and in the few seconds it was in the air, she swiftly made a hand seal. In a split second, the dagger flashed with electricity, wind and thunder surged, and the deafening sound of thunder shook everyone's eardrums. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. Insignificant skill. Loopy Toad controlled the fortress to assume a defensive stance, and the dagger didn't pierce Loopy Toad's solid armor. Wind and Thunder 9 kills wasn't a very high-level assassination spell, and most importantly, Loopy Toad realized that the dagger Jiang Yingyue had used was of very poor quality. Not only hadn't it been able to pierce through the walls of his fortress, it had actually broken off at the outermost layer of the fortress' defensive light membrane. You should be able to tell. Yes, this is indeed a very ordinary dagger, and it doesn't even have a sharpened edge. But as long as it's effective, even the most ordinary dagger is very deadly. Jiang Yingyue chuckled as she walked step by step in Loopy Toad's direction, as if she wasn't afraid of the threat of Loopy Toad's bombardment at all. You. It was only at that moment that Loopy Toad seemed to finally realize the crux of the problem. From the very beginning, Jiang Yingyue's Wind and Thunder 9 kills hadn't been meant to kill him. Jiang Yingyue hadn't even planned to kill him with this move. She was using the high-frequency electricity that the Wind and Thunder 9 kills could create in a short period of time to find an angle to control the shadow under his feet to lengthen. This might only take less than 3 seconds, but he had already unknowingly entered Jiang Yingyue's firing range. So from the very beginning, the other party's goal hadn't been to kill him with the Wind and Thunder 9 kills, but to use the electricity to touch his shadow and set up a bomb. Finally realized? Jiang Yingyue smiled. I'm already a dead man, so it's not a loss for me to trade 1 for 1. You've already lost. Jiang Yingyue was very confident in the explosive power of the shadow bomb. Even if the steel fortress was impregnable, if the shadow blew it up from the inside, no matter how strong the external defense was, it would be useless. This is a time bomb. In 1 minute, you'll be reduced to ashes. So, do you have any last words? Asked Jiang Yingyue. I do indeed have one last question. Loopy Toad's voice was unexpectedly calm. What I want to know is, when Numinous Mother agreed to fight you back then, did she receive any benefits? Benefits? Jiang Yingyue smiled. She's the ancestor of the world of killers and the senior of all us killers. Shouldn't we give her some tuition fees before the duel? So, you gave her money? The corners of Loopy Toad's mouth twitched. The life and death contract said that as long as I survived the duel with her, I could use all the abilities I comprehended during the duel. It was a pity that I died in battle, but I didn't regret it. How much was the tuition? Not much, 100 million for one duel. I thought I wouldn't die, so I signed up for a membership card, which only cost 50 million to fight once. Jiang Yingyu counted on her fingers. I remember that I recharged 1 billion in one go. You actually recharged money. Loopy Toad, Wang Zhen and Little Silver were stunned. They were now certain that this numinous mother, who had been begging for a fight everywhere, was a swindler. Chapter 1185. At this point, the truth had already come to light. Given Mother Wang's personality, there was no way she would swindle people, so someone had to be impersonating numinous mother. It was just that only Jiang Yingyu knew who this person was and what they looked like. Loopy Toad hadn't expected that after accepting Little Master Ling's main mission, to eliminate the person behind the scenes, they would inadvertently receive a new side mission, find the swindler who had been using numinous mother's identity all along to swindle people. This matter concerned Mother Wang's reputation, and judging from the impostor's behavior so far, the other party seemed to have a certain understanding of Mother Wang. If in the end, the other party decided to retire and transfer all the sins to Wang Ma, a powerless body refining stage cultivator, would definitely get herself killed. So to sum it up, Loopy Toad felt that Jiang Yingyu couldn't die. At the very least, before they found the impostor, Jiang Yingyu's knowledge of the impostor might be the best clue at hand. You look like you want to fight back. But you no longer have the chance. Jiang Yingyu stared at Loopy Toad as her shadow bomb entered its final countdown. Once the last 10 seconds were over, it would immediately explode. Using a low-level assassination spell like Wind and Thunder 9 kills to confuse the enemy's line of sight was in fact using this brief flash of lightning to quickly adjust the position of the shadow and then install the bomb. This kind of attack where the real and the fake interacted was one of the highest realms of battle. This kind of battle strategy often wasn't developed on the spot, but was achieved after a long period of accumulated experience. But at that moment, Loopy Toad laughed coldly. Your combat level is indeed very high. It's indeed very difficult to reach this level without the accumulation of hundreds of thousands of battles. But this king wants to say that while battle strategy is important, being able to predict the enemy's next move is even more important. You have 3 seconds left. Jiang Yingyu sighed in her heart. She hadn't expected the green-furred dog in front of her to actually be in the mood to give an explanation at a time like this. Was it trying to prove the law of immortality in battle? She counted down in her heart, as if she could already see the green-furred dog being blown to pieces by the bomb. Although the shadow bomb only blew up the shadow and wouldn't cause any damage to the surrounding environment, once the shadow was broken, the body would immediately be torn to pieces. This was the frightening thing about her shadow bomb. It could silently take away a person's life. 3, 2, 1. As the countdown ended, Jiang Yingyu turned around. A true expert would never face an explosion head-on. However, after taking a few steps, she realized that something was not right. The familiar explosion did not come, and the green-furred dog in human form and its companions were alive and well. They were not blown into pieces of flesh like she had imagined. Impossible. Jiang Yingyu turned around. Only now did she realize that she had been tricked. At some point, Loopy Toad, which had been in its human form, had suddenly turned into its dog form and swiftly attacked her from behind like a green bolt of lightning. Jiang Yingyu still didn't know what was going on. She only saw the huge virtual body of a demon king appear behind Loopy Toad, and then her vision immediately went black. Suddenly, he couldn't see anything. This was the sky-swallowing toad clan's swallowing and spitting spell, which was passed down through the generations. It could swallow anything into the space in its mouth. The shadow bomb was suddenly terrifying. It could be planted in the shadows. But if it was in an absolutely dark and enclosed space, where no shadow appeared, then it would be impossible to move. The shadow bomb's ability was almost like a decoration. Jiang Yinyu struggled in the darkness as she was swallowed into the space. This space was much larger than she had imagined, and there was no echo when she shouted. Useless Junior. You've entered this king's space and you still want to escape. Loopy Toad sneered. Little Master Ling had already strengthened its dog form swallowing and spitting spell. The swallowing and spitting spell space was extremely wide and impregnable. Once someone at Jiang Yinyu's realm was trapped inside, there was absolutely no way she could break free. The only thing Loopy Toad needed to pay attention to was that no light could penetrate the space inside, so that Jiang Yinyu wouldn't have a chance to use the shadow bomb. Loopy Toad had already predicted that given Jiang Yinyu's conceited personality, she would never stare at the bomb when it exploded. A lot of experts had the habit of turning their heads when they didn't see an explosion. Thus, Loopy Toad instantly seized the opportunity to directly pounce on Jiang Yinyu, turning the situation around and winning. You're not a simple dog. Trapped in the space, Jiang Yinyu realized that she couldn't escape after struggling, so she gave up and decided to conserve her strength to look for another opportunity. In any case, this king is a demon king of the demon race. Now that I've turned from good to good and received some advice, I'm even stronger than before. Demon King. Jiang Yinyu was stupefied. To be honest, the spirit chi on Loopy Toad's body was too clean. She didn't sense the slightest bit of a demon king's demon chi on Loopy Toad. At that moment, she felt as if she had been swallowed by an artificial black hole. It was so dark that there was no light at all, and any light effects created by spells would be instantly and cleanly absorbed by this space. The difference was no more than a few microseconds. No matter what Jiang Yinyu did, there was no way she could set up a bomb to blow up this space. I have one more question. Although it had been declared a temporary failure, Jiang Yinyu was still unconvinced. How did you dodge my shadow bomb? Junior, you suddenly have a very good idea. But you don't seem to have noticed the shadow bomb's fatal flaw, Loopy Toad replied patiently. Fatal flaw? You can turn the shadow you touch into a bomb, but this kind of bomb has limitations. If the shadow changes in the meantime, your bomb will fail, Loopy Toad said. What you touched was my human-shaped shadow, and after I turned into a dog, my shadow immediately became different. As a result, your shadow bomb also failed, so it didn't cause me any harm, and there wasn't any explosion as you imagined. Reset. Jiang Yinyu hadn't expected this kind of thing to happen. That's right. You were tricked. But how did you know about this? Jiang Yinyu felt it was inconceivable. There are times when battle strategy is important, but any strategy is useless against a gambler. This king bet that your bomb won't work on me after I turn into a shadow. So, this battle is my victory. Loopy Toad smiled confidently. Chapter 1186. Jiang Yinyu didn't expect that she would be defeated in such a way by the enemy she didn't want to lose to the most. In this completely closed space, not even a bit of light could penetrate through. The slippery and sticky space spirit liquid under her feet made Jiang Yinyu feel even more gloomy. This king has taken you down, but you seem to be very unwilling. After swallowing Jiang Yinyu, Loopy Toad kept an eye on her reaction. It didn't doubt at all that she was plotting to escape the space. What he needed to do now was to raise his vigilance and not let Jiang Yinyu find any opportunity. How many experts are there in this stalactite cave? Loopy Toad changed back into its human form and asked Jiang Luiying about the situation. Wang Ling had personally set up his special space, which cut off all external information and was no different from a small black hole. Jiang Yinyu was imprisoned in his heart, which was equivalent to being completely cut off from the outside world. In another dimension, she could only hear Loopy Toad's voice. Do you think I'm a person who would betray others? You don't have to tell me anything about the person behind the scenes. You only need to provide information about the others. I need to know what they're capable of. We can figure out a way to defeat the enemy ourselves, said Loopy Toad. So, what's the difference between this and colluding with the enemy? Jiang Yinyu sneered. Do you really want to rely on the person who resurrected you? He is a rebellious disciple who disobeys the heavenly Tao. Sooner or later, he will suffer the wrath of the heavens. Loopy Toad calmly analyzed the situation for Jiang Yingyu. You're absolutely safe here. Even if the person behind the scenes is punished by heavenly Tao in the end, all the resurrected will disappear. As long as you stay here, you'll be able to keep your life. And I'll promise you something else. As the saying went, know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. Loopy Toad still didn't know how many enemies the other side had in their camp, so it felt that this was an excellent opportunity to win Jiang Yingyue over. Furthermore, it had a trump card in its hands that Jiang Yingyue couldn't refuse. I am also a person who has seen the world. Ordinary conditions are useless to me. In the space, Jiang Yingyue gently rotated the handle of the umbrella and opened it. She crossed her legs and gently lifted her buttocks to sit on the surface of the umbrella. Her whole body floated up and left the ground. If I said that the numinous mother you saw was fake, would you believe me? Loopy Toad continued at that moment. Fake? This was impossible. She was so strong. And so intellectual and elegant. As you say, she was an intellectual and elegant woman. Do you think such a person would be addicted to material things? Are you obsessed with money? These words made Jiang Yingyue fall into deep thought. In fact, this matter was indeed a little strange. Collecting tuition fees was not in line with numinous mother's character. This was the person she admired the most in her life. If the enemy she paid so much for was a fake, it would be the regret of her life. What kind of person is the real numinous mother? An existence more powerful than the fake you've seen. She's a person with a strong heart, said Loopy Toad. On the other side, Jiang Yingyue thought hard. Do you dare to swear to everything you said? A great heart demon oath is not reliable. If you think this king is lying to you, this king can swear an oath. Forget it. You don't have to go through so much trouble. I can trust you this once. However, I am only responsible for providing information on abilities that I know. Jiang Yingyue took a deep breath and gave her final reply. She did not care what the person behind the scenes who resurrected her was planning. But meeting numinous mother was indeed what Jiang Yingyue wanted to do the most at the moment. In her heart, she told herself that if she couldn't meet the idol of her dreams, even if she was given another chance to live, in the end, it would only be regret. Entering the second zone of the stalactite cave without a hitch, the humidity in the cave was even heavier and the walls were covered with all kinds of mushrooms. These mushrooms were bright purple and red and gave off a faint fluorescent glow. One look was enough to tell that they were poisonous things that couldn't be eaten. Wang Zhen found an old four-legged furnace. The surface of the furnace was already covered in rust due to the humidity in the stalactite cave. Turning on the furnace, Wang Zhen reached out to touch the embers in the furnace. He raised 2 fingers to the tip of his nose and sniffed. This furnace was last used a month ago. You can even smell this? In the chat channel, Little Silver was amazed by Wang Zhen's sense of smell. Logically speaking, this should be Loopy Toad's job. Wang Zhen is right. Loopy Toad also sniffed. This elixir is made from the nearby fluorescent mushrooms. It can be used to relieve the humidity in the body. From the clues they had gathered so far, Old Huang was in fact a very particular person. Cultivators, especially elderly cultivators, were very afraid of humidity entering their bodies. The humidity in the cultivation world was extraordinary. If the body was too damp, it would freeze the meridians and affect the output of spirit qi. Old Huang had been stationed in this stalactite cave on 9 Dragon Mountain all year round, so he naturally knew how to use the natural resources here to dispel the humidity. He was a very particular old gentleman. He's been living here for a long time. This level of moisture has to be expelled at least once a week. Wang Zhen frowned. The last time this pill furnace had been used was a month ago, which meant that the real Old Huang might have been swapped a month ago. When he thought about it carefully, Wang Zhen suddenly felt terrified. If Old Huang had already been switched a month ago, how could Old Huang have been replaced? If Old Huang had been swapped out a month ago, then there was a high probability that the enemy would coordinate their actions from within and without. In other words, it was very likely that all their current actions were under the enemy's control. Because of his combat experience in the domain of the gods, Wang Zhen suddenly had a bad feeling. Do you feel it? In the space, Jiang Yingyue sighed softly. I think the three of you might not even be able to make it through the second zone. The resurrectees, who were placed in the stalactite cave, were ranked according to their overall combat strength. The resurrectees at the bottom of the ranking were stronger, so the fact that Wang Zhen had taken care of them alone didn't mean anything. In fact, in terms of realm strength alone, Jiang Yingyue was ranked in the top 3 among the resurrectees, but with the power of Shadow Dao, this ranking had to be reset. Some shadow image abilities were so disgusting that even Jiang Yingyue herself couldn't bear to watch them. Her shadow bomb also seemed very abnormal, but it had the fatal weakness of being easily reset and having a short range. Once it was seen through, it would be very easy to deal with. He's here. At that moment, Jiang Yingyue opened her slender eyes in the secluded space and sensed a familiar aura. Who is it? The person ranked 7th among the resurrectees, Li Huanran. His shadow image is called Demon Shadows. Demon Shadows? It's very dangerous. Be careful. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.